The candles in the great hall had burned low before Jon Snow slipped away from the late winter feast. Outside, the moon wove silver threads through the bailey's darkness, and a crust of half-melted snow crunched beneath his boots. Ghost followed close at heel, white fur ghostlier still in the pale light, amber eyes flicking from wall to wall as if the direwolf sensed every hidden corner of Winterfell better than any man. Jon's head still rang with the laughter and music he had fled. At the high table, Robb toasted the visiting Glovermen while Sir Roderick discoursed on the spring thaw. Even Bran, half asleep in his seat, had lingered for sweet cakes. But Jon felt the old familiar hollow in his chest, a seat he could never quite fill at feast or council or hunt. And so he slipped away. A gust of wind rattled the iron gate guarding the crypts. Most nights Jon would have turned toward the practice yard to work sword forms until the chill bit his fingers numb. But something tugged him downward tonight, a soft pull in the gut like the undertow of a river current. He unlatched the gate, Ghost padding soundlessly beside him, and started down the narrow stone steps. The air was rich with the smell of damp earth and ancient dust. Torches hissed as he lit them one by one, setting each in its bracket along the wall. The statues of the kings of winter brooded in silence, their stone direwolves frozen in perpetual watchfulness. Jon touched the pommel of Longclaw at his hip, a habit now, and let the torchlight guide his way. He paused before Lyanna Stark's effigy. Ned had never spoken of her at length, but the grief in his Lord Father's eyes whenever someone uttered her name was its own story. Jon studied the delicate features carved in pale stone, the curve of cheek, the softness of lips that would never speak again. A wreath of winter roses, forever in bloom, encircled her brow. Jon had stood here many times, but tonight the stillness felt charged, alive. Ghost tipped his head, sniffed, and gave a low whine. Jon knelt, running a palm over the floor at the statue's feet. The mortar between two flagstones looked different, thin, crumbly, where the rest of the floor was solid. He set the torch in a niche and pried with his fingers. The stone came up with surprising ease, dragging long tendrils of dark soil with it. Beneath lay a small hollow wrapped in rotted linen. The fabric disintegrated when he touched it, revealing an object the size of a helmet. Jon drew it out, heart hammering. Scales, green so dark they were nearly black, shot through with flecks of gold, glistened like polished jade in the torchlight. Between the scales ran veins of deep red, as if the thing had been carved from living ember. "A dragon's egg," whispered a voice at the back of his skull. He had seen one once, cracked and petrified, in Maester Luven's library. This was heavier, warmer. He pressed his thumb to a ridge. The shell yielded a breath, as if alive beneath his touch. Ghost growled, not in warning but wonder. The direwolf's muzzle brushed the egg, and Jon felt a faint flutter of heat spread along his palm, up his arm, settling like a cold inside his chest. He nearly dropped it. The torch flickered. A chill raced down his spine. Behind him, nothing moved, yet the air hummed with invisible wings. Jon cradled the egg to his chest, lowering the floorstone back into place with one hand. He swore he could hear a faint heartbeat inside the shell, steady, determined. He should tell Lord Stark at once. Yet he hesitated. How long had the egg lain here, secret even from Ned? Why was it warm now, after what must have been decades? The warmth deepened, soothing the cold in his fingers. A tremor passed through the shell. Subtle as the sigh of a sleeping child. Jon wrapped it in the remains of the linen and slipped it beneath his cloak. In the dim torchlight, Lyanna's stone eyes seemed to watch him, neither condemning nor absolving, merely waiting. Ghost pressed against his thigh, urging him upward. Back in his cell beneath the rookery, Jon set the egg on the small table beside his cot. He built a heap of coal in the brazier, coaxing flame from flint, careful not to wake the castle with smoke. Outside, the wind keened along the battlements. Within, the egg pulsed like a second hearth. He tried to sleep, but his dreams were restless. Wings beat above a forest of snow-laden pines. A woman's laughter, clear, young, rang through an open courtyard heavy with roses. Then the vision blurred into crimson and gold, a field of fire, dragons spiraling in the sky. One beast dove toward him, scales glinting emerald, and in its molten eyes Jon saw himself reflected, but older, eyes fierce with knowledge he did not yet possess. He woke before dawn, sweat slick, despite the chill. The eggshell glimmered softly, no longer merely warm but hot enough that the air above it shimmered. He reached to turn it in his hands, and a hairline crack traced itself along a single scale, glowing faintly orange. Jon's breath caught. He'd meant to read more, to seek Maester Luven's counsel, yet the shell's answer came unbidden in the silent hours. Hot tears stung his eyes. For a moment he saw Ned's face, stern, proud, and the secret that pressed between them like iron. "You are a Stark." Yet the egg pulsed with another truth, one older than Winterfell's walls. By the time the first horn sounded from the ramparts, signaling dawn, Jon had wrapped the egg in a spare cloak of black wool and hidden it in the niche behind his cot. Ghost refused to leave its side, curling around the bundle protectively. Jon dressed quickly for morning drills, but his mind lingered with the warmth behind him. At the yard, Robb swung a blunted longsword, sparring with Jory Castle. Snow clung to their boots and flew in plumes with every heavy step. Jon joined the line of castle squires, wooden practice blade in hand, yet each parry felt distant, as though his arms moved without his consent. He glanced toward the rookery window, half expecting to see smoke curling from it. Ser Rodrik barked for focus, and Jon forced himself into the rhythm. Thrust, counter, sidestep. Shield raised, pivot, cut low. Still, the egg's heartbeat echoed in his ears, pounding louder than any clash of wood on wood. When Ser Rodrik called halt, Jon's tunic clung with sweat, though he scarcely felt the effort. Robb clapped him on the shoulder. "You're half gone somewhere, brother. Dreaming of glory?" Jon managed to smile. "Something like that." They broke fast together in the morning room. Bran chattered about the new pups born to the kennel bitch, and Arya flung breadcrumbs at the ravens perched outside the window. But every sound seemed dull, distant. Jon's gaze drifted to the nearest hearth, where flames licked at oak logs, and he wondered if the egg yearned for more heat. When at last he found excuse to leave, the corridors felt longer than ever. He rounded the spiral stair to the rookery, only to freeze on the landing. Samwell Tarly, paunchy, pink-cheeked despite the cold, stood outside Jon's chamber, one pudgy hand raised to knock. Jon cleared his throat. "Sam?" Sam jumped, nearly dropping the parchment he carried. "Oh, I hope I didn't wake you. It's the roster for Night Watch. Maester Luven asked me to, see if you'd trade the second bell with Halder." "I will." Jon slid past him, heart thudding. Ghost's low growl seeped under the door. "I've sleep to catch. Spent too long at the yard." Sam glanced at the door. "Is Ghost all right? He sounds upset." "Now." Left him alone too long. Jon forced a grin and ushered Sam down the stairs. "Hey, misses me." Once Sam's steps faded, Jon slipped inside. The air was thick with warmth. Ghost sat rigid beside the bundled cloak, ears flat. Jon knelt, unfolding the wool. The egg glowed from within, cracks spiderwebbing across its surface like lightning frozen in glass. Thin wisps of steam rose where the shell met cold air. A sharp tap, then another, echoed from inside. Jon held his breath. Lips moved, though he spoke no words. A prayer half-remembered from the sept and half-learned from old Nan's tales. Light burst from a widening fissure, and a shard of shell flipped free, exposing wet membrane beneath. A tiny claw poked through, glistening, ivory-tipped with silver. The creature wriggled, muscles writhing beneath slick green skin. Another shard slid away, revealing a snout like polished jade. The newborn dragon screeched, a thin, reedy sound at first, quickly swelling into something fierce, triumphant. Ghost backed a step, hackles raised, yet he did not snarl. Instead, he bowed his head, tail sweeping slowly side to side. Jon's chest ached with wonder. He reached out, and the hatchling's eyes met his, wide, golden, slitted like a cat's. In those eyes lay recognition. Not hunger, not fear. Recognition, as if the creature had waited lifetimes for this very moment. Tiny wings, barely broader than Jon's palm, unfurled. The membranes shimmered with an iridescent sheen, green at one angle, deep crimson at another. The dragon's body was no longer than Jon's forearm, yet when it stretched, flexing talons and tail, it filled the dim chamber with presence. He whispered, "You're mine then." The dragon chirruped, crawling unsteady onto his forearm. Its talons pricked leather but did not pierce flesh. It weighed almost nothing, yet Jon felt the weight settle in his soul, a bond forging itself in silence. Ghost edged closer, sniffed the hatchling. The dragon hissed, smoke curling from nostrils, but Ghost merely licked its scaled head. The hatchling's hiss subsided into a curious trill. Jon exhaled shakily. Questions crowded his mind. How? Why? What next? But none could eclipse the simple, impossible fact. Dragons lived again in the north. He fed the hatchling scraps of rabbit stewed from the kitchens, which it devoured with sharp, needle-thin teeth. Flames danced across its tongue when it burped, scorching a black mark on the tabletop. Jon laughed, a sound half wild, muffled quickly for fear of listeners. For 3 days he kept to his chamber save the hours demanded of him. Drills, meals, guard shifts, each moment away a torment. He smuggled braziers and piled coals high, turning the room into a sweltering cave. The hatchling, which he named Stormfire after an ancient sword whose tale Robb favored, grew visibly, shedding slivers of shell and stretching wings twice the span they'd been at birth. Every night Jon sat cross-legged before the brazier. Stormfire curled around his shoulders, the dragon's warmth sinking into his bones. He spoke softly of the wall, of Lord Commander Mormont, of the snowbound desolation that awaited him when winter truly set in. Once he even spoke of his mother, though he knew no name to give. Through it all, Stormfire listened, golden eyes unblinking. Tail coiled about Jon's wrist like a jeweled bracelet. Yet secrets could not remain buried forever at Winterfell. On the 5th morning, Maester Luven rapped upon Jon's door. "You have missed dawn drill," the Maester called. "Lord Stark will want a word." Jon's pulse quickened. Smoke leaked from beneath the door. Stormfire squeaked, sensing his alarm. He opened the door a crack. "I was unwell." "Fever." Luven frowned. "May I examine you?" Before Jon could answer, the hatchling shrilled, sharp. "Hungry." "Impatient." Luwen's eyes widened. He pushed the door fully open. The room sweltered like a forge. A small dragon clung to Jon's shoulder, scales blazing emerald, wings fluttering. Luven took one stunned step backward. "7. Save us," the Maester whispered. Jon shut the door behind him, trapping the heat inside. "I wanted to tell you. You found it in the crypts." Luven's voice trembled, shock warring with scholarly fascination. "How long has it? How old is it?" "I don't know." Jon stroked Stormfire's neck, calming the dragon. "It was warm the moment I touched it. I couldn't risk." The Maester gathered himself. "This must go to Lord Stark. Secrets destroy families, Jon." Jon stiffened. "He kept a secret all my life." Luven winced. "Your father did what honor demanded to protect." "Protect whom?" Jon's voice cracked. Stormfire hissed in echo. "I was never told. Now this finds me, and you say to hide it from him?" The Maester looked at the dragon, awe softening his sternness. "There have been no dragons in Westeros for generations. The world will roar when it learns of this. Dragonfire in the north. Imagine what the Queen would do, or the King beyond the wall." And no. Jon thought of golden lions, of dragonbone-handled blades flashing in sunlight. War would come. Swift and terrible, if word spread. Yet the egg had lain in secret for years, because someone feared that very storm. "Please," Jon said, voice low. Give me time. Let me learn to control him, to understand why he hatched for me. Then, I'll tell father." Luven hesitated, then touched 2 fingers to Stormfire's muzzle. The hatchling sniffed, then nudged the maester's hand. "Miracles seldom wait for scholars," Luven murmured. "But knowledge is best tempered with caution. 1 fortnight, Jon. After that, I tell Lord Stark myself." Jon exhaled, relief mingling with dread. "Thank you. Keep him warm, feed him often, and keep Ghost near. Wolves and dragons share old kinship, if the legends hold." The maester turned, cloak swirling, and hurried away. That night Jon sat by the brazier, Stormfire curled against his chest, Ghost at his feet. Snow drifted past the window in slow, soundless flurries. The dragon's wings beat softly in sleep, each exhale a whisper of smoke. Jon closed his eyes, feeling the rhythm of beast and wolf, and his own heart merge into a single pulse, ancient and new. Dreams took him. He stood in the godswood beneath the heart tree's bleeding eyes. The air smelled of sap and distant fire. A woman emerged from the shadows, her hair black as a raven's wing, a garland of winter roses in her hands. "Promise me," she said. Jon reached out, but the scene shifted. He knelt on a field of ash. Stormfire grown vast, wings shadowing half the sky. Men in northern mail and southern plate alike raised swords against a common foe he could not yet see. Above them all, ice-tipped wind clashed with roaring flame, and the world trembled. He woke before dawn, hand wrapped around the dragon as if he feared it might vanish. Yet Stormfire remained, warmth steady as summer's sun. The fortnight passed in measured secrecy. Luven brought scrolls of Valyrian lore, teaching Jon to read the curling script by candlelight. The hatchling became a creature of ceaseless curiosity, sniffing inkpots, batting at feather quills, snorting smoke whenever Jon stumbled over a pronunciation. Ghost watched with patient eyes, sometimes sparring playfully with the dragon. Slow swipes exchanged for harmless bursts of ember. But walls at Winterfell had ears. Catelyn Stark noticed the brazier fires burned hotter in the rookery chimney. Robb wondered why Ghost's fur smelled faintly of singed pine. Arya claimed she heard wings in the night sky. Rumor fluttered like ravens, landing eventually upon Ned Stark's shoulders. One dusk Jon found his father waiting outside the rookery door. The Lord's gray eyes betrayed no emotion, yet Jon felt as if the last star of winter had gone out. Inside, Stormfire dozed on a perch by the window. Ned stepped forward slowly, gaze fixed on the dragon. He did not draw steel, did not shout. Instead he knelt, as if paying respects at a tomb. Jon's voice came hoarse. "I'm sorry." Ned studied the hatchling, now the length of a hound, wings big enough for short glides, then looked at Jon. "Your mother loved roses. Did you know?" Jon shook his head. "She loved stories of brave princes and dragons in far-off places." Ned's jaw tightened. "I took vows to protect her memory, and you. Yet some truths will not stay buried." Stormfire chirped, preening. Ned reached out, let the dragon sniff his hand, then traced the green scales with a finger. Rhaegar Targaryen gave Lyanna 3 rose-red promises. When I found her, only one remained. A tremor crossed his face. An egg, warm to her dying touch. Jon's knees weakened. "Who am I?" Ned closed his eyes. "My son, my blood of the north, and more." He stood, placing a hand on Jon's shoulder. "But the world is not ready for dragons and their riders reborn. We must guard this secret until the time comes." Jon felt the bond within him flare, Stormfire's golden eyes reflecting his own. When will that be? When winter truly falls, and the dead walk? Ned's voice was low, sorrowful. Then the promised prince must have fire in his hands. Ghost howled, the sound echoing through stone. Stormfire answered with a trumpet of flame that shimmered against the chamber walls. In that moment Jon understood. Destiny had claws and wings and a wolf's fierce loyalty. It had waited in darkness, guarded by ghosts and secrets. And now it opened its eyes in him. Beyond the rookery window, the first real snow of the season began to fall. Silent but relentless, cloaking Winterfell in white. Jon watched the flakes drift past, tiny and cold, even as warm scales pressed against his neck. The storm had broken. The long night loomed ahead. Yet within that fragile hush, a dragon's heart beat beside his own, bright as dawn's first ember. He would be ready when the world called. And for now, as the snow fell and the fires burned, Jon Snow, no longer merely the bastard of Winterfell, held the secret of flame and shadow in his arms, and whispered promises into the dark that only wolves and dragons could hear. Oh, Kay. A sharp hush lingered in the rookery long after Lord Stark departed. Jon sat cross-legged upon the fur-covered floorboards, letting the brazier heat soak through the soles of his boots, while Stormfire dozed upon his lap. The hatchling had already doubled in length since hatching, a sleek coil of scaled sinew and nascent muscle, whose rhythmic breaths pulsed warmth into Jon's thighs. Each exhale carried a faint ember scent, mingling with the burnt oil smell of raven droppings and old parchments, until the chamber felt less like Winterfell, and more like some smoking cavern beneath Dragonstone. Ghost lay just beyond the circle of heat, muzzle upon paws, red eyes half-lidded. The dire wolf's presence calmed Jon as surely as the dragon's heat. Wolf and worm seemed linked by some half-remembered kinship older than any seven-pointed doctrine. Ghost would doze, ears twitching at every tongue flick or wing rustle from the fledgling. Occasionally he would rise and circle the room, sniffing at the gap beneath the door before curling back beside Jon with a quiet wuff, as if to say that, so long as he watched, no shadow could slip through the stone walls. Jon let his palm rest between Stormfire's folded wings, feeling the steady thump of two tiny hearts, dragon and his own, echoing with a shared cadence. Maester Luven's fortnight bargain weighed heavily on him, yet Ned Stark's measured acceptance offered a fragile hope. Perhaps they might shape this miracle rather than let the wider world claim it. There was work to do, though, and precious little time. He thought of the wall, looming, relentless, beautiful in its own austere way, of Lord Commander Mormont's call for new rangers, and of the half-remembered dread that swam behind Sam's timid eyes whenever the others slipped into conversation. If winter truly threatened to bring the dead south, then Stormfire could become the spear of dawn against that darkness. Yet only if he survived long enough to grow into the fire that throbbed unseen within his marrow. Jon rose, careful not to jostle the dragon. Stormfire chirruped, wings flaring for balance, claws pricking the wool of Jon's breeches. Soft moonlight crept through the shutters, revealing a scatter of shed scales, minuscule emerald crescents that glittered like shards of shattered glass. Jon knelt, sweeping them into a small clay jar. Maester Luven wished to study their composition and, quietly, test whether they carried any alchemical potency. An unexpected tap rattled the shutters. Jon tensed, one hand drifting to Longclaw, until a low croak followed. Shaggy Dog, Rickon's black-feathered raven, who preferred open windows to perches. The bird pecked once more, and Jon cracked the shutters. Cold rushed in, carrying flakes of snow. Shaggy Dog hopped inside, glaring at the brazier with disdain, then fixed Jon with a beady eye. "Little Lord hungry," it rasped, voice harsh, but eerily articulate. "Little Lord hungry." Jon fished a strip of boiled mutton from his pocket, the leftovers of his own supper, set aside for Stormfire, and tossed it to the raven. The bird cawed approval, snatched the morsel, and fluttered to the rafters. Stormfire's head snapped up, tongue flickering, pupils thin as quill points. He watched the raven devour the meat, scenting the air, but made no move. Jon stroked the scaled neck. "Not food for you," he murmured. "Not yet." Stormfire sneezed a puff of gray smoke. Shaggy Dog squawked indignantly and flapped back out the window, flurry swirling in his wake. Jon latched the shutters, then gathered a stack of half-charred logs from the corner. Fuel vanished faster each day. Winterfell's stores were ample, but a dragon's appetite for heat could beggar even the richest lord. Jon had begun chopping extra firewood after training, claiming he sought to strengthen his sword arm. No one questioned a bastard's eagerness for labor, yet every fresh blister on his palms reminded him how deeply this secret already cut into his daily life. He fed the brazier, coaxing the flames until Stormfire spread his wings and basked in the glow. The dragon's membranes shone translucent jade where firelight passed through, revealing delicate veins that pulsed faint gold. Jon watched, mesmerized. A soft knock at the door jarred him awake. 3 raps. Quick. Hesitant. Jon's heart hammered. He scooped Stormfire into the crook of his arm and drew long claw, its Valyrian steel seeming to drink the firelight. "Who is it?" "Bran Toll." The boy's voice trembled. "Please, Jon, let me in." Jon sheathed the blade and cracked the door. Bran stood on tiptoe, wide-eyed, swathed in a thick gray cloak far too large for him, torch in hand. Snowflakes clung to his lashes. "Come," Jon said quietly, ushering him inside. Ghost nosed Bran's knees in greeting. Stormfire wriggled, sensing new scent. Bran's gaze fixed on the dragon, and his jaw fell open. "It's true," he breathed. "I heard old Nan telling Hodor that a green cat with wings was flying round the battlements, but Hodor didn't know what a cat was. I thought it was one of her stories." Jon set Stormfire atop the open crate of coal, where the heat radiated. "You must keep this secret, Bran, even from Robb and Arya." Bran nodded solemnly, though wonder still danced in his eyes. "Is it yours? He chose me, or I him?" "I'm not sure." Bran edged closer, reaching out a tentative finger. Stormfire sniffed, then licked Bran's knuckle with a tongue hot as a kettle iron. Bran yelped, though more in awe than pain. "It's warm like bread from the ovens." "Aye. Dragons are fire-made flesh. Will he be big as the Red Keep skull someday? If we live to see it." Bran's expression sobered. "Father says war is brewing in the south again. King Robert shouts at the Great Council about coin and debts, but Lord Stark fears the Lannisters more than the Gold Cloaks." Jon crouched beside Bran, lowering his voice. "Stormfire could make enemies think twice if he grows in secret. But if they learn of him too soon, every king and sellsword across the narrow sea will come hunting." "I won't tell," Bran promised, crossing his heart. "Not even Rickon. He tells Shaggy Dog everything." Jon smiled. "Thank you, little brother." He guided Bran to the door, listening as the boy's boots faded down the stairwell. Outside, the watchman's horn blew first hour past moonrise. Jon returned to the brazier. Stormfire twisted his neck, peering at the doorway long after Bran left, as if already judging Stark children like riders in waiting. The next days blurred into fevered routine. Jon rose before dawn, feeding Stormfire a mash of quail eggs and minced rabbit, laced with charcoal to harden his developing bones, Maester Luven's suggestion after poring over dusty Marish bestiaries. He reinforced the rookery's shutters with a double sea-cloth drape to keep heat from betraying itself in plumes of rising steam. He fashioned a small harness of supple calf leather for the dragon's chest, with loops to secure beneath his own jerkin, should he need to smuggle Stormfire beyond Winterfell's walls. Every spare candlemark he trained. Sword in the yard, mind in Valyrian scrolls, heart in wordless communion with wolf and worm. Snow deepened each sunrise. The Godswood pond froze over. It died, a silver birch bending under icy weight. Ravens began bringing grim tidings. Wildling raids south of the wall. A sellsword host gathering in the Vale under Littlefinger's coin. Whispers of Queen Cersei courting Braavosi blades. Ned Stark received each parchment in silence, palm pressed to forehead, as though feeling the makings of a noose tightening around his house. Yet he never once alluded to the dragon in Jon's care, trusting in his son's secrecy. The burden was heavy but strangely sweet. On the 12th day, Jon woke to Stormfire tugging at his sleeve with needle teeth. Pale dawn light seeped through the shutters, revealing frost creeping across the inner stone. The brazier coals long gone. Jon's breath blossomed in white puffs. "Forgive me," he muttered, scrambling to stoke the fire. As embers flared, Stormfire vaulted to the window ledge. The dragon sniffed, wings quivering. Jon cracked the shutter. A blaze of frozen wind whipped in, and with it, the scent of fresh-killed meat. Below, In the snowy courtyard, Theon Greyjoy dragged the carcass of a goat toward the kennels, bragging loudly to two Glovermen about his marksmanship. Jon's gut tightened. Goat's blood streaked crimson lines across the white yard. Stormfire launched. A blur of emerald and jade shot past Jon's face, talons raking air. Jon lunged too late, fingertips grazing a vanishing tail. He cursed, grabbed cloak and sword, and bolted after the dragon. Outside, cold bit like knives. Jon splashed through drifts, breath ragged. Theon turned at the sound of wing beats, then cried out as Stormfire dove. The dragon latched onto the goat's flank, ripping a strip of flesh, wings beating frantic. Theon fell on his backside. "Seven hells!" he shouted, scrambling away. "What sorcery?" Jon skidded to a halt. "Back!" he barked. "It's mine." Theon's eyes bulged. "Yours? Is that a wyvern?" Stormfire hissed, smoke curling from nostrils as he tore another mouthful. "Maester Luven." Ser Roderick and a pair of guards ran from the armory, drawn by the commotion. Jon spread his arms protectively. No blades. Roderick halted, mustache bristling. "Boy, what in the king's name is that creature?" "A dragon," Luven said quietly, voice thick with both dread and thrill. "Alive." Gasps rippled among the onlookers. A groom dropped his pitchfork. Theon scrambled behind a fence, eyes darting for weapons. Fire crackled. Stormfire sucked breath, chest swelling. Jon darted forward, interposing himself. "Easy," he whispered in Valyrian. The words Maester Luven had drilled into him, phrases of calm and command. "Vestra. Yaris. Menamsor." The dragon relaxed, more curious than afraid, and resumed tearing flesh. Goat blood spattered snow like abstract sigils. Jon knelt, stroking the scaled neck. Lord Stark strode from the keep, cloak billowing. His gaze swept the tableau. Soldiers frozen mid-draw. Theon pale with disbelief. Jon kneeling beside a creature of myth. Ned's jaw tightened, but his voice was steel smooth. "Return to your posts." No one moved. He added, "Now." The yard emptied in murmurs and hurried footfalls until only father and son remained, ghost circling warily. Snow fell in slow, deliberate flakes, hushing the world. Ned approached, boots crunching. Jon met his eyes. He was hungry. "So I see." Ned crouched, studying Stormfire with a warrior's eye, measuring wingspan, muscle, the shimmer of half-formed flame at the creature's throat. "He grows quickly. Quicker than the book said. Books are poor jailers of dragons." Ned reached, letting the hatchling sniff his glove before stroking along the spine. "We must adapt our plan. Too many eyes witnessed this." Jon swallowed. "I can take him north. Build a hidden eyrie beyond the Wolfswood." "Now." "And starve him?" "Dragons need heat. The farther north, the harder he must fight for warmth." Ned stood, scanning battlements. "Better we bring the witnesses inside the secret than chase rumors across the kingdoms." Jon frowned. "Trust Theon? The Glover men? We choose carefully." Ned's breath steamed. "Ser Roderick, Maester Luven, Theon if need be. He owes his life to our house, though his tongue loves wagging. Oaths may suffice, or leverage." He gestured. Jon scooped Stormfire in his cloak, wrapping the dragon tight. The creature grumbled, but settled against Jon's chest, heartbeat thrumming. Together, they returned to the rookery, ghost padding silent guard. Maester Luven arrived soon after with parchments for sworn silence, sealed by Stark sigil and old god's witness. Roderick signed readily, eyes ablaze with childlike wonder. Theon hesitated, until reminded that the Ironborn prince resided in Winterfell by Ned's grace alone. He added his name with a sardonic flourish. The Glover men were dispatched south that same afternoon, bearing sealed letters of Stark apology for some fictitious breach of hospitality, anything to send them far from Winterfell before their tongues loosened. That night, Ned convened a clandestine council in the Solar. Himself, Jon, Luven, and Ser Roderick. Catelyn was conspicuously absent. Ned forbade her inclusion, knowing her deep mistrust of Targaryen fire. They spoke in hushed tones while Stormfire curled on the hearth, flames licking round him harmlessly. King Robert hates dragons. Sir Roderick grumbled, stroking his mustache. He'd send his whole navy to shell Winterfell to rubble if word reached court. Robert hates what threatens his crown, Ned replied. Yet winter threatens every crown alike. Perhaps even he will see sense, if guided. Maester Luven spread a tattered map of the north. When the others marched in ancient days, the first men spoke of ice, serpents the size of mammoths. Their breath froze men where they stood. If such creatures return, dragonfire is our only sure defense. Valyrian steel is too rare. Jon traced a route along the map, from Winterfell to Castle Black, then beyond into the haunted forest. We could breed more. If Stormfire can fly east come summer, search the shattered towers of Valyria. Dreams of boys, Roderick sighed. One dragonling we can barely feed. A flight of them? We'd strip every forest for leagues. Jon opened his mouth, but Ned lifted a hand. We scale our hopes to our means. First, we raise this one. Teach him the north. Teach him us. He looked at Jon. And teach yourself restraint, my son. You cannot charge across battlefields astride him tomorrow. I know. Jon felt heat in his cheeks, but accepted the rebuke. Good. Then we plan. They devised a schedule of feedings and fly times. At dawn, when mists veiled the sky, Jon would take Stormfire into the Godswood for short hops between frost-rigid branches, ghosts shadowing below. At dusk, the dragon would bask in the highest tower room, an unused granary emptied of grain, its windows shuttered and warded. Luwen prepared tinctures of ground bone and lamprey oil to quicken growth without inducing gut rot. Sir Roderick assigned 4 trusted guards, men who had fought whites at the Night Fort during a ranging decades past, to patrol the rookery levels, posing as additional raven keepers. Outside this circle, Winterfell carried on. Robb sparred, Arya plotted escape from Septim Ordain's embroidery, and Bran climbed despite warnings. Yet whispers still slithered. A stable boy swore he glimpsed a green hawk breathing smoke. Old Nan claimed dragons hunted only maidens with silver hair, which set Arya to checking mirrors for gleams. Ned's bannermen sensed secrets in his tight-lipped letters, and some began sending their own ravens skyward. One frigid morning, ravens from White Harbor arrived with ill news. Lord Wyman Manderley's eldest son Wylus, journeying home from King's Landing, had vanished on the King's Road near the Neck. Tracks suggested a Lannister party rode ahead of him. Ned clenched the parchment. This stinks of southern plots. If the Lannisters begin claiming hostages in the north, war is closer than we think. Bow. That dusk, Jon ascended the granary stairs with Stormfire strapped snug to his chest. The tower's apex room, once heavy with grain dust, now thrummed with heat. Jon had lined the slate floor with iron braziers, their coals glowing. Icicles on the roof melted into a constant drip, pooling around cracks in the stone. He unbuckled the harness. Stormfire bounded forward, wings slapping air. The dragon leapt onto the windowsill. Sniffing the twilight, Jon cracked one shutter. A hush of mauve-lit snow stretched across Winterfell, lanterns flickering in pockets below. Far to the east, the last river wound like a silver serpent through white plains. Stormfire spread his wings. Jon held his breath. The dragon beat once, twice, then hurled himself into open sky. Jon's stomach dropped. Stormfire swooped in an awkward arc, tail whipping, catching an updraft. He turned, climbing with every beat until he skimmed the tower peak, then banked and glided across the yard. A lone sentry gaped upward. Jon cursed and yanked the shutter wider, whistling in the low Valyrian tone. Luwen insisted dragons favored. The hatchling tilted, wobbled, and plummeted. Jon's heart lurched, but Stormfire arrested the dive, air whooshing beneath green membranes. He angled back, talons extended, and crashed through the window with a clatter of slate chips. Jon grunted, catching the scaly mass against his chest. Stormfire clung to him, body trembling. Not with fear, but exhilaration. Jon laughed shakily. That's enough for one evening. The dragon nuzzled his chin. Breath hot and brimstone sweet. Jon closed the shutter, bolted it, then slumped to the floor, heartbeat drumming. Outside, snow continued its ceaseless descent. But within that room, the air shimmered like summer noon. Weeks melted into each other like candle wax. Stormfire grew, shedding juvenile skin for armor-thick scales vined with copper. His wings broadened enough to stir whirls of dust each time he stretched. Flames no longer flickered. They roared when he tested his lungs, necessitating stone troughs instead of brazier bowls. By the new moon, Jon could not carry him, now near half the length of a small horse. But the dragon still trilled whenever Jon entered, coiling his neck round Jon's shoulders in an awkward hug that left scorch marks on wool cloaks. Bran visited often, bringing tidings from the yard. Robb's triumphs, Arya's misdemeanors, Catelyn's suspicion. He swore secrecy each time, though his widening grin threatened to split his face whenever Stormfire rumbled affection. Once he begged to climb onto the dragon's back. Jon consented only in the enclosed tower. Stormfire crouched low, allowing Bran to sit astride for a breath-holding moment before the boy slid off, eyes bright as new-fallen ice. Ghost and Stormfire formed their own bond, play battles of tail versus fangs, growls versus trills. Jon watched, marveling at how direwolf instincts adapted. Ghost bared throat in submission when dragonfire spurted. Stormfire nipped without drawing blood when wolf teeth grazed a scale seam. Pack hierarchy reshaped itself around fire and fur. But beyond Winterfell's walls, rumors sharpened into blades. A raven from Moat Cailin brought panic. Bodies found clad in crimson and gold. Slain by crossbow bolts fletched with black and yellow veins known to be favored by gold cloaks. Lord Bolton reported spies sniffing around the Dreadfort, asking after Stark curiosities. Someone in the south knew Ned guarded a secret worth killing for. One wind-harsh night, Jon paced the tower while Stormfire prowled restless circles. Flames guttered low, coal stocks dwindled dangerously. Jon scratched figures on a wax tablet, pounds of meat consumed per day, cords of wood burned, growth rate extrapolated. Even if no war came, Winterfell could not sustain a subadult dragon through deep winter. Ned ascended the stair, cloak dripping with sleet. He studied Jon's calculations, lips thinning. I feared this. He will outgrow our keep before moon turn. We could send for wagons of peat from the bogs, Jon suggested. Peat burns long, or tap the hot springs beneath the walls. Channel steam into this chamber. All the peat of Greystead cannot match a dragon's furnace. And diverting the springs risks collapsing half our foundations. Ned sighed. There is another path. He unrolled a narrow strip of parchment, a personal letter sealed with a direwolf. Jon read. Ser Jorah Mormont, exile in Essos, had written pleading for pardon. But between lines lay another message, coded in the ways of northern scouts. The exiled knight could secure passage to Dragonstone by discreet Lyseni smugglers, no questions asked, for an exorbitant sum. Dragonstone is dormant, Ned said. Empty halls, volcanic tunnels, fire under stone. Stormfire would thrive there. Jon's pulse quickened. Send me with him. Ned's gaze softened yet remained steel underneath. And tear my heart in two? You are no longer a boy, but you are still my son. He paced to the shutter. If war breaks, I need a Stark dragon here as deterrent. Yet if the secret bursts, Robert's wrath might swallow us whole. Jon felt tugged apart. Duty to the north versus duty to Stormfire. The dragon nudged his shoulder, sensing turmoil. Maester Luven arrived, summoned earlier. There may be compromise. He unfurled a crackling scroll of ancient Valyrian glyphs. In the century of blood, dragonlords carried hatchlings across seas in black iron cages, heated by wildfire braziers. Risky, but possible. We could transport Stormfire south secretly, establish him at Dragonstone. Then you return to Winterfell before absence fans suspicion. Sir Roderick later added logistical counsel. A merchant galley out of White Harbor, holds modified to vent smoke under guise of baking ovens, Stark bannermen disguised as stevedores, gold from Ned's deep coffers to buy every tongue along the route. The plan formed like frost embroidery across winter glass. Delicate, dangerous. Jon agreed, though his gut twisted. 2 moons hence, Stormfire would sail. He would accompany as far as White Harbor, then hand over to a chosen escort, Roderick and 3 men sworn by blood, and ride hard back to Winterfell. Ned insisted. One Stark heir must remain close. Preparations swallowed days. Jon forged a bond leash of black steel links lined with padded leather, allowing limited flight on deck. He drilled Stormfire to perch calmly within the iron crate, coaxing him with roasted boar haunches. The dragon obeyed, though resentment smoldered in golden eyes. The night before departure, Bran crept into the tower, tears shining. Jon hugged him tight. I'll be back before the snows melt. But he won't, Bran sobbed, stroking Stormfire's scales. Hell grow where we can't see. He will remember you. Dragons never forget the scent of those present at hatching. Bran managed a wan smile. Then when he comes north again, I'll climb onto his back proper. A promise. Jon clasped forearms with him, the way knights did before tourney. Outside, snow muted the world, yet inside hearts roared. Stormfire curled round Jon that final night, wings draped like a living cloak. Ghost slept pressed against Yon's thigh, sparing soft whines whenever dragon claws twitched. Jon dreamt of stone towers wreathed in magma light, of ravens bursting into phoenixes, of a distant red comet carving the sky like a blood-bright sword. Dawn came steel cold. The cortege rode out under false pretenses. Ned claimed urgent talks with White Harbor on grain tariffs. Only Maester Luven and Catelyn knew the deeper truth. Lady Stark's eyes flashed with fear and anger that her husband risked even more secrets. But Ned's quiet parting kiss softened her stance. Robb clasped Jon's shoulder. Arya punched his arm. Bring me something sharp from the sea. And Rickon waved a wooden sword menacingly at the crate as though guarding it. The procession creaked through Wintertown, leaving twin ruts of wheel and hoof. Snow-caked smallfolk bowed, unaware of the sleeping fire lurching past them. Jon rode beside the wagon, one hand on Stormfire's crate, murmuring lullabies in Valyrian. Ghost padded alongside, white against white. Above, sky clouds churned like stirred milk, promising heavier storms. 2 leagues out, near the ancient barrow mounds, hoofbeats thundered from the rear. A rider in crimson surged forward, one of Ned's outriders, but his cloak blazed Lannister red. Jon wheeled his gelding. The stranger yanked helm free, curls of golden hair spilling. Sir Jaime Lannister himself, smile sharp as fresh-honed steel. Well met, Bast. Jon Snow. Is it? I feared I'd missed my chance to greet the Stark envoy. Ned reined beside Jon, hand resting on pommel not yet drawn. Kingslayer, you ride far from the King's Road. Escort duty. Jaime's green gaze flicked to the covered wagon. King Robert worries northern roads grow unsafe. Thought I'd ensure your grain tariffs find amicable resolution. Jon felt Stormfire stir, heat pulsing through crate walls. Sweat prickled beneath fur despite cold wind. He met Jaime's lazy stare. We have no need of your escort. Jaime laughed. Need and want seldom dine together. I trust you've room for one more sword. I'd hate to return south without at least sampling White Harbor's famed crab wine. Ned's jaw clenched. Very well. Ride at the rear. Delighted. Jaime wheeled his destrier, calling over his shoulder. Mind your cargo, Lord Stark. Northern winters can crack any shell. Jon's blood chilled. Did the Kingslayer know? Or was it jest? Stormfire scraped talons against iron, a dull clang masked by rumbling wheels. Jon murmured calming words, but worry burrowed like frostbite. That night, they camped among snow-bent pines. Stormfire's crate rested near Jon's tent, brazier beneath to keep heat. Jaime wandered the campfire circle, sharing jests with Stark guards, spinning tales of jousts and court scandals. Yet his eyes kept sliding to the wagon. Jon fingered Longclaw's hilt. After midnight, Jon rose to relieve himself. Ghost slipped into the trees. Stormfire slept, radiating warmth. Snow muffled the world. Jon walked beyond lamplight, lungs burning with cold. Returning, he saw a shadow by the wagon. Imy, pry bar in hand, testing hinges. Blade hissed free. Jon closed distance in 2 strides. Step back. Jaime turned, grin fox sharp. Curiosity bastard. What treasure do Stark smuggle? Benderu. None for your eyes. Jaime balanced the bar across shoulders. I could open this and free you of your burden. Secrets don't suit honorable folk. Jon shifted, keeping Moon behind him. I know your honor, Kingslayer. Do you? Jaime's smile faded. Then let's wager. You and me. Steel to first blood. Win and I ride south, leaving your crate untouched. Lose and I look inside. Jon's heart thundered. He was good, but Jaime Lannister was legendary. Yet if he refused, Jaime might force the crate anyway. Stormfire's heat beat through iron as if urging courage. Done, Jon said. They stepped 15 paces apart in the trampled snow. Cloud-veiled moon lent watery light. Steel whispered as Jaime flourished his golden lion pommel. Jon inhaled slow, centering blade high. Ghost emerged from shadows, growl low. Stormfire within the crate stirred, claw scraping. Jaime struck first. A blur. Jon parried, shockwave numbing his wrist. He countered, but Jaime flowed aside, tapping Jon's back with flat of blade, mocking. The Kingslayer's laugh rang. Slow. Jon swallowed dread. Remember Maester Luven's counsel. Speed is armor against skill. He changed stance, feet sliding, watchful. Jaime lunged again. Jon batted thrust, sidestepped, slashed. Jaime ducked, but snow slipped under his boot. He staggered an inch. Jon saw opening. He pivoted, thrust upward. Valyrian steel hissed past Jaime's guard, carving a shallow slash across the Kingslayer's cheek. Blood spattered white. Jaime's eyes flared surprise, then admiration. He lowered sword, touched the cut. First blood. Jon kept guard. Leave. A wager is a wager. Jaime bowed with ironic flourish. You have faint enough for 2 men, Snow. I shall speak of this in King's Landing. If only to shame certain louts. He sheathed sword and strode for his horse. Until next we cross blades. Guard your crate. Jon watched him disappear into trees toward the south road, bootprints filling with falling snow. Ghost returned, nuzzling Jon's hand. He exhaled shakily, turning to the crate. Inside, Stormfire's eyes gleamed through a vent, glinting gold like melted sun. Almost lost you, Jon whispered, palm against iron. The dragon thumped tail, forgiving. The galley-weighted fortune rocked in White Harbor's icy swell, lanterns bobbing. Stormfire's crate, now disguised beneath barrels of salted cod, was hoisted aboard by sweating sailors sworn to Manderley gold. Sir Roderick and 2 guards embarked. Ned clasped Jon's forearm on the quay. Ride swift. King's summons may arrive any day. Jon nodded. Keep Bran from climbing, and tell Arya. Tell her Winter hasn't beaten me yet. Ned smiled thinly. She will insist otherwise. Jon knelt beside the crate. A hatch slid back. Stormfire pressed muzzle to Jon's brow. Flames flickered between needle teeth, yet they did not burn. Jon murmured Valyrian endearments, promising reunion. He fed one last strip of smoked venison, then slid the hatch shut. Iron clanged final. Lines cast. Sails caught wind. The galley slipped from harbor mouth into heaving, shivering sea. Jon watched until only a dwindling glow remained upon horizon, then wheeled his horse, Ghost sprinting ahead through wind-scoured streets. Snow fell heavier on the return march, great wet clumps that blanketed road and rider alike. Jon's thoughts churned. Had he chosen right? Each dawn without Stormfire felt like phantom limb. Heat absent from ribs, air colder in lungs. Yet hope kindled. In Dragonstone's fiery womb, the dragon would soar, grow, and one day answer his whistle across half a continent. 3 days north of Barrowton, a raven found Jon at a roadside inn. Robb's hurried script, King Robert riding for Winterfell with retinue of 300, Lannisters among them. Jon spurred his gelding, snow spitting in his face. He reached Winterfell gates beneath bruised dusk. Horse lathered, Ghost limping from exhaustion yet refusing to lag. The yard erupted, Robb embracing, Bran cheering, Arya punching his shoulder, that fast, must flown. But relief chilled at sight of new banners, stag crowned above crimson lion, already lining the ramparts. Ned met him in the great hall. Lines of fatigue, etched deeper since their parting. The king arrives by week's end. Jon exhaled. If Robert Baratheon suspected nothing, Stormfire's voyage remained secret. For now. But secrets bred shadows, and shadows bred songs of treachery. Across the sea, in crumbling Dragonstone halls, warmed by volcanic heat, a young dragon would soon unfurl wings beneath a ceiling of blackened vaults, singing fire into hollow night. And when winter's heart clenched the world in icy claws, Stark and Snow alike would look south, waiting for the emerald star to rise upon stormlit sky. Jon clasped the pommel of Longclaw, feeling the faint warmth left by Stormfire's farewell. Ghost pressed against his thigh, red gaze fixed on distant thunderheads. The battle for tomorrow brewed on multiple horizons: court intrigue, northern frost, ancient night, and somewhere between, a dragon grew in exile, carrying stark hopes in each widening wingspan. The long night might yet find dawn, if wolf and dragon could keep their secret flame alive long enough to ignite the world. Isha. The wind slithered through Winterfell like a living thing, slipping beneath doorways and rattling shutter slats with icy fingers. Jon felt it most keenly in the small stone chamber he had reclaimed beneath the rookery, now cold enough that his breath fogged in the moonlit air. The brazier that once burned almost to slag for Stormfire lay dark, its belly caked in sooty ash. The silence rang louder than any dragon's trumpet. He had spent so many nights talking softly to the hatchling that the sudden void scraped at his nerves like a dull blade. He had returned only 2 days earlier, but the keep already thrummed with awkward anticipation. The kind of taut expectancy a castle adopts when kings approach. Servants hurried thicker than ants across flagstones, bruising their shoulders beneath casks of Dornish red and bushels of fresh apples collected from the last stores in the cellar. Acts of hospitality became drills of desperation. Sanded banisters, scoured armor, new rushes strewn in corridors that would soon be ground under drinking boots. Jon helped where he could, sharpening swords, hoisting casks, and ignored how many eyes cut sideways when he passed. Not suspicion, perhaps, but curiosity soaked in the fear that hung about his shoulders, the fear that the secret he bore might crack open if anyone looked too hard. He had mastered the habit of pressing a hand against his ribs when he felt the phantom weight, as though patting a pouch to make sure gold hadn't slipped away. Only Ghost stayed close, as if determined that Jon should not stand entirely alone in the loud hush preceding Robert's arrival. The direwolf sensed the hole left in the nightly routine too. Each dusk, when Jon finished his chores, Ghost would nose at the rookery door and whine, expecting the reedy whistle that had summoned Stormfire from whatever shadow he prowled. 3 times now the wolf had padded restlessly about the empty brazier, sniffing the scorched bricks before returning to Jon with a frustrated huff. On those nights, Jon would kneel and press his brow to Ghost's sleek skull, murmuring promises that in time the warmth would return. But promises felt thin against the snow, and thinner still against the threat of the coming court. King Robert, never a man for subtlety, traveled with banners enough to paint the sky. A show of royal color that demanded its own tributary of food, wine, and patience. Cersei rode with him, twined in guards of lion-laced plate. Jaime would ride too, wings of white enameled on his flaring pauldrons, and a new scar still raw along his cheek where Jon's blade had tasted him. Jon tried not to imagine the Kingslayer's grin when he spotted the bastard among the Stark ranks. The third dawn after Jon's return dawned bruised violet, clouds sagging low as if descending for their own counsel. He stood on the outer battlements with Robb and Theon, their breath silver plumes against the gathering dark. Below, the King's Road coiled northward, A pale slash in the white land, and far down its length flickered heaving torchlight. No more than fireflies at first, then torches, then spears. Robb gripped the frost-furred stone. King Robert travels with half of the southern realm, or so the ravens claim. He always loved spectacle, Theon said, folding arms over his chest. He wore a jaunty smile, but his fingers drummed restlessly on his biceps. Both men looked older to Jon since the journey east. Robb's square jaw set more firmly, and Theon's laughter seemed to cling like oil rather than bubble like wine. Jon shifted his cloak. "The castle is ready." "Let's hope father is ready," Robb murmured. Snow began to fall, fat flakes drifting onto black wool. They waited in silence until the first outrider thundered through Winter Town, banner snapping above his helm, crowned stag, golden on a field of black. Jon's stomach clenched. A half-hour later, the vanguard entered the gatehouse in clanking splendor. Baratheon household knights, gold cloaks of the royal city guard, and a cluster of sellsword outriders from the Stormlands whose braided mustaches glistened with ice. Behind them trotted a retinue of Tyrell harpers, wearing cloaks of green and gold, playing lutes whose strings froze mid-note. Robert Baratheon himself rode within a ring of bodyguards, fur-lined cloak cinched tight over his shoulders, face flushed from wine or wind or both. Age weighed on him, his once huge frame sagged with flesh, and his beard, though still black, showed threads of white like frost on midnight velvet. Yet his eyes retained the bright spark Jon remembered from small folk tales, the reckless spark that toppled a dynasty. Queen Cersei flanked him, impassive atop a dappled mare. Slim beneath a cloak of crimson velvet lined with ermine. Behind her rode Jaime, scarred cheek mottled pink and cold, eyes scanning ramparts with idle arrogance. Ned descended the steps to greet the king in the yard, cloak billowing. Jon watched from the parapet, feeling each word only in glimpsed gesture. A brief clasp of forearms between old friends, the king's booming laugh, Ned's tight-lipped replies. Robert's gaze roamed the walls as though searching for memories he'd left behind. Lyanna's ghost, perhaps. The echo of promises broken at the Trident. Jon felt that history reach up like graveyard roots, wrapping around every montane, riderless horse, and bolt of cloth. Meryn Trant called the guard to stillness, vox ringing across stone. Musicians struck a strident chord. Winterfell's banners bowed in the wind. And beneath all that pomp, Jon could nearly hear the iron crate of Stormfire grinding in the galleys hold far to the east, each wave bringing dragon a breath closer to volcanic cradle. He left the wall before the formal procession spilled into endless welcomes. Ghost followed while men-at-arms scrambled to store arms or offer wine. In the great hall, Jon slipped into shadows between pillars, unseen by Cersei's keen green eyes. He had no seat at the high table anyway. Only when Robert called for Ned's children did Jon step forward with the rest, bowing low. The king studied him, eyes narrowing with that uncertain flicker men adopt when faced with the living echo of some shame long buried. "So this is the snow," Robert said at last, voice softer than expected. Jon kept head bowed. "Stands like a king though he wears no crown." "A crown of ice suits him," Jaime quipped, sipping wine. The cut on his cheek shone red against pale skin. Cersei smirked but said nothing. Robert grunted, motioned Ned close, and the conversation moved on. Later, as torches burned low and music gave way to lewd jokes, Jon slipped out into the kennels. Ghost bounded ahead, dancing through drifts. The noise of feasting dulled to a distant rumble. Jon leaned against a frost-painted pillar, fingers tapping a forgotten rhythm. The heartbeat he had once felt beneath Stormfire's shell. He imagined the dragon now, huddled in a hold reeking of fish and tar, iron crate glowing like a forge. He pictured Ser Roderick walking the deck, cloak whipping, chasing gulls that circled the smelled heat. He wondered if Roderick understood how hollow Winterfell felt, without that sudden warmth. He wrote nightly by dim tallow. Letters of careful greeting, short recounts of the day's events, questions about the dragon's appetite, scale growth, and mood. He sealed each with plain wax and pressed no sigil, trusting trusted hands to carry them to White Harbor's dockside broker, there to be ferried after the galley. And every morning he checked his secret hidey hole under the rookery stair, hoping for fresh parchment bearing Sir Roderick's cramped script. None came yet. The sea was slow. On the 4th day of the royal visit, Robert announced a boar hunt. Stark men would ride to Kingswood, he declared, forgetting that Kingswood lay 300 leagues south. Ned gently reminded him of Wolfswood, and Robert roared with pleasure at the correction. Jon found himself summoned as extra sword-bearer. He suspected Jaime's hand. The Kingslayer offered his own sly grin across the yard when Ned informed him. Cersei sniffed at the notion of her husband chasing swine through snowy glades, but she sent 3 Lannister guards to join the hunt, including a hulking red-bearded reaver named Sir Boros Dunstan, whose heavy footfalls broke the frozen ground. They rode at dawn, breath pluming. Jon wore simple leathers over mail and tried to ignore Theon's prattle about the difference between hunting boar and seal. Ned kept close to Robert, while Jon took rear guard beside Ser Boros. Snow swirled through the pines, blanketing tracks so swiftly that even the hounds lost scent. The king drank from a silver flagon, cheeks blotched crimson, and sang verses of bawdy Stormlander ballads that made Bran widen his eyes when he later heard retellings. Ghost loped ahead of the hounds, tongue-lolling. Boros Dunstan eyed the direwolf with contempt, muttering about demon dogs. Jon laid a hand on Longclaw's pommel once but kept silence. They tracked a boar's wallow by chance near dusk, the mud pit crusted in ice. Fresh prints circled the rim, deep, splayed, the sign of a monster tusker winter-starved and dangerous. Robert's grin split his beard. They formed a half-circle. Torches hissed in the snow-littered dark, and wind howled through branches, dislodging powder that spiraled in golden light. Jon's senses sharpened. He heard his own blood pumping like river rapids, the creak of leather, the crack of frost in sapwood. The boar burst from underbrush with a squeal like tearing steel. A mountain of bristles and rage, eyes red, tusks the length of daggers. Spears leveled, but the beast crashed through them, slamming Ned's horse sideways. Robert bellowed a challenge, leaping from saddle, hammer raised. The boar fainted, then charged. Jon kicked free of stirrup and dashed around a fallen pine, Longclaw gleaming dull. Boros lunged forward to intercept, but his boot slipped. The boar's shoulder threw him aside like a sack. The beast barreled for Robert. Ned shouted, flinging a spear that missed. Time collapsed into shards. Jon saw the boar's tusk slash across the king's thigh, ripping crimson. Robert staggered, swung his warhammer. The impact cracked ribs, but the beast did not die, only shrieked and wheeled. Jon darted in, sliding across churned mud, sword flashing. He severed a hind tendon. The boar stumbled, squealed. Robert roared again, pounding the hammer down, splintering spine. At last, the beast collapsed, steaming in the snow. Blood gushed from Robert's thigh. Ned dismounted, pressing cloth. The deep crimson soaked through instantly. Flesh wound, Robert growled, but his face drained white. Drink cures all. He drank instead of water. They cut a litter from branches and bore him back beneath moonlight, hooves crunching frozen earth in staccato echoes. Jon and Ned walked either side, steadying. Jaime paced behind, silent, lips pursed. Boros rode in shame, arm hanging limp where tusk had clipped tendon. Hounds trailed, whimpering over lost scent. At Winterfell's gate, Cersei descended stone steps, robes swirling. Her gaze flicked from Ned's crimson-stained hands to Robert's ashen face. "My king," she murmured, voice velvet yet sharp as broken glass. Robert laughed weakly. Maester Luven bustled forward, demanded a litter to the maester's chambers. That night, Jon waited outside the sick room while Luwen stitched flesh and poured boiling liquor to cleanse. The screams rattled the keep. Ghost lay at Jon's feet, hackles raised. Theon joined, eyes wide at the sound. "If the king dies here," he muttered, "the south will blame the north." Jon said nothing. Dawn bled into smoky red across the horizon when Luwen emerged, face gray with fatigue. "The king will live," he said, providing fever stays away. But fever came that night. Robert thrashed in delirium, calling for Lyanna, for wine, for a hammer he could not lift. Cersei hovered like a winter moth, her whispering commands half heard through thick walls. 3 days passed while Winterfell held its breath. Jon spent hours in Ned's solar reading every Raven report that landed. Sir Roderick's first letter finally arrived. Dragon safe, appetite enormous, scaling quickly. Jon pressed the parchment to his lips, breathing the faint scent of salt, imagining the gale that had carried the words north. He longed to reply but dared not risk further messages until the king's state settled. On the 4th morning, fever cracked. Robert opened his eyes clearer than any since arrival and demanded roast potatoes. Relief flooded the hall. Yet Cersei's expression remained guarded. She knew any brush with death shifted thrones like loose stones in a river. Jaime's eyes flicked between his sister and the recovering king, counting possibilities. During those tense, quiet days, Jon resumed his practice of dawn sword forms in the Godswood. Snow shrouded the old weirwood in trembling silence. Ghost sat sentinel while Jon cut invisible foes, each swing exercising fear. One morning Bran appeared on crutches, cheeks ruddy-dyed oil. "I saw Stormfire," he whispered as Jon reset stance. Jon froze. "In dreams. I was a bird, flying above gray water. I landed on a tower of black stone and looked through a window. He was there, sleeping on a bed of coals. I felt his warmth even in the dream." "Ben?" Jon's throat tightened. "Dreams are strange things." Bran's eyes shone with uncanny knowledge. "Father says the old gods send glimpses. I think Stormfire misses you." Jon knelt, gripping Bran's shoulders. "Then you tell him I miss him as well." Bran nodded solemnly, and Jon wondered what other truths the boy glimpsed when he slipped behind those wide eyes. Weeks crawled on. Robert regained strength enough to sit at high table, though he winced when rising. He lauded Jon, toasting, "The bastard with a lion's bite," the words slurring, sending Cersei's glare slicing across goblets. Jaime merely stroked his cheek scar and smiled. One frosted evening, Ned summoned Jon to the crypts. Candles guttered along stairs, pooling shadows between statues. Ned stood before Lyanna's effigy, cloak wrapped tight. "News from Dragonstone," he said, handing Jon a fresh ribbon parchment. Jon unfolded, heart thundering. Sir Roderick's script. Stormfire had tripled in weight. Steam fissures within the ancient tunnels provided constant heat, and the dragon took to soaring between crumbled towers, though flight remained clumsy. A fisherman swore he saw a green comet over the cliffs. It was Stormfire, wings catching sunset. But whispers spread in nearby villages. They blamed witches, but rumor might drift to the capital. Sir Roderick advised caution, and funds, for loyal mouths. Jon exhaled shaky. "He thrives, and draws eyes." Ned clasped hands behind back. "Robert recovers, but Cersei sharpens claws. I fear any hint of Targaryen flame would send her running to Pycelle with poison-laced suggestions." "Them Terwer." Jon traced the cold edge of Lyanna's spear carved in marble. "What do we do?" "I will ride south with Robert when he departs." Ned's voice sounded carved from the same stone. "He asked me to be Hand of the King again. I refused once. I may refuse again. Yet traveling with him means I can watch for whispers of dragons. You will remain here, help Robb rule the north. Stormfire stays a ghost story." Jon's pulse hammered. "You trust me with that?" Ned's gaze softened. "You kept him alive. You faced a kingslayer to keep a crate shut. You fought boar and whisper alike. Winterfell needs such steel." He placed a hand on Jon's shoulder. "And perhaps when the snows recede, we journey together to Dragonstone. By then, Stormfire may bear 2 riders." Jon smiled through the ache of longing. "I will be ready." Footsteps echoed. Robb emerged, carrying a torch. "Father, the Queen seeks you. She says Robert is ready to ride home as soon as the snows lighten." Ned turned. "Tell her I come." He squeezed Jon's shoulder once more, then followed Robb up the stairs. Jon lingered. Ghost padded into the settled dust, sniffing the wreath of winter roses around Lyanna's head. Jon spoke softly into the chill. "Mother, If my birth brought storm and snow, let my life bring dawn. Watch Stormfire for me. Something in the silence, echo of distant water perhaps, felt like a scent. Jon climbed after his family. Robert's departure came swift as a pull of cloth. Carts repacked, banners furled, Lannister guards snapping orders. Jaime sought Jon in the yard, extended a leather-wrapped bundle, a whetstone of Lannister forged steel. No steel remains bright without work, Jaime said, expression unreadable save for glint of respect. When next we spar, make sure your edge is worthy of a king's guard's cheek. Jon accepted, bowing. I'll keep it keen. Jaime laughed, mounting his horse. See that you do. Snow. Cersei offered no farewell, but her eyes swept Jon with predatory assessment as she rode past, measuring, as if guessing how many secrets clung to his cloak. Robert bellowed thanks, promising barrels of arbor gold come spring. Ned rode at his side, armor dull but heart heavy. Jon saw it in the slump of his shoulders. As hooves thundered south, Winterfell seemed to sigh. Snow fell heavier thereafter, burying tracks in the king's rowdy aftertaste. The keep settled into deep winter rhythms, rationing grain, mending roofs, keeping watch for whites. Jon rose before dawn each day, and drilled with Robb until arms shook. He served at dinner councils, spoke for small folk petitions, and learned the feel of authority balanced on uncertain bones. Nights he knelt before the brazier in the empty tower room, eyes closed, picturing Stormfire's emerald shape circling volcanic heights. He recited Bran's dream back to himself, until the words felt like prayer. Ravens came sporadically. Sir Roderick's updates, cautious but hopeful. Stormfire's wings thickened, tail spade sharpened. The dragon learned to ignite driftwood logs set afloat in the bay, then dive to snap the charred remains mid-air. Roderick included sketches, a sinuous silhouette silhouetted against a blood-red dawn. Jon studied each charcoal line, tracing scales with fingertips as though they might burn. Then one night, as the New Year's first thaw teased the edge of frost, Jon dreamed. He stood upon Dragonstone's wind-lashed parapets, cloak whipping like banner. Stormfire crouched before him, huge now, mane of spiky crests down his spine, eyes twin bonfires. Jon felt heat ripple across skin, yet did not flinch. He mounted without command. The dragon vaulted skyward, claws showering sparks as they scraped basalt. Below, surf crashed in endless roar. They pierced clouds and emerged into starlit vault. Worlds spread like an ink-black map. Ahead, a streak of silver light split the sky. No star but sword, the symbol of House Dane though reversed in color. Jon knew without knowing that it pointed north. He woke in the rookery loft. Sweat, chilling on brow. Ghost pressed close. He rose, heart pounding. Outside, the first pale glow of dawn edged the horizon, and from far below rang the watchman's horn. One blast only, signaling rider approaching. Jon dressed quickly and descended. Robb met him at the gatehouse. A lone courier from White Harbor dismounted, cloak torn by storms. He knelt, offering leather satchel. Jon's hands shook opening it. Inside lay two items, a scroll bearing Roderick's seal, and a single shed scale the size of a child's palm. Deep emerald veined with gold, edges razor sharp. Sir Roderick's words were brief. Stormfire grew too large for crate or secrecy. Sailors whispered loudly now. Word reached a Lyseni smuggler who sold rumors as readily as spice. Fleet of Bravos sighted near Dragonstone. Flags unknown. Roderick reinforced towers, but storms hampered defense. He advised Jon consider swift journey south. Dragon demands bonded riders soon, or others may claim him. Jon looked at Robb, whose blue eyes mirrored both fear and awe. I have to go, Jon said. Robb nodded after a breath. Then we make it official. Father left you in command of Winterfell's training cadres, but he did not forbid you to travel. We will forge a letter, calls it inspection of wall garrisons. You ride east instead. Alone? I'll send two of my best, Robb said. gesturing to Jory Castle and Hallis Mullen, who stood nearby. Silence carved across faces. Jon closed fist around Stormfire's scale. Its warmth seeped into his glove despite the morning chill. Ghost howled once, long and low. A call that rippled across snowbound roofs like a promise delivered. Folk paused, mugs mid-raise, shovels mid-lift. They felt the shift, though they knew not why. That afternoon, Jon packed quietly. Arya burst into his chamber, hands on hips. "Going again? You just returned." Jon hugged her. "Duty. Bring me something sharp." She punched him lightly. "Or ride back on a dragon." Her grin said she believed it possible. Bran presented him with a tiny wooden token he had whittled. A direwolf entwined with a serpent-like dragon, carved so their bodies formed one endless loop. "So you don't forget us," Bran said, eyes bright with unspoken understanding. That night Jon stood at the gatehouse, horse saddled, ghost pacing. Snow drifted, glittering in torchlight. Robb handed him a pouch of silver, the forged letter, and the kingly whetstone Jaime had gifted. "If you see the Kingslayer again," Robb said, "cut deeper." Jon smiled. "Hell bleed enough when Stormfire roars." They clasped arms. Then Jon swung into saddle, cloak rippling like black water. Ghost loped ahead, white shadow among shadows. Winterfell's gate creaked open, releasing them into wide cold world. Behind, the castle lights gleamed warm. Ahead stretched leagues of snow, river, forest, and beyond that, the endless sea and a volcanic isle where fire waited. Jon took a deep breath, tasting frost and distant salt. Somewhere south, a young dragon snarled at ocean wind, muscles nodding for flight. Somewhere south, secrets crumbled like old stone in the face of hungry eyes. He kicked heeled a flank. The horse surged. Ghost bounded, paws silent. The road swallowed them, and the moon climbed high. A pale coin tossed upon black velvet. Jon rode, heart thrumming with the rhythm of wings yet to beat just above his head. And though the night was bitter, a heat like distant furnace wrapped his ribs, urging him onward toward the storm, toward the flame, toward the future only wolves and dragons could shape. K. Snow hissed beneath iron-shod hooves as Jon urged his dun gelding through the gate of Winterfell and onto the King's Road. The mare snorted steam into the frost-laden air, ears twitching at the mournful creak of the portcullis grinding closed behind them. Two riders flanked him, Jory Castle on a rangy bay, and Hallis Mullen on a squat black destrier whose dark coat drank the moonlight. Neither man spoke. Their cloaks snapped like torn sails in the wind, and the leather of their breastplates groaned each time their mounts shifted. Ghost loped ahead in near silence, white fur turning blue in the pre-dawn gloom, a phantom scouting the road. The direwolf's paws left faint depressions that filled swiftly with sparkling powder, as though even his tracks refused to linger. He paused often, muzzle raised, reading the scents borne on the knife-edged breeze. Rabbit, owl, fox, the faint copper tang of distant blood. Jon trusted the wolf senses more than any man's. They moved at a ground-eating trot throughout the first gray hours, keeping to the center of the road where the ruts of the king's recent procession had churned the surface to slush. The cold numbed Jon's thighs in spite of layered wool. He barely felt it. His mind was too loud. With every clop of hoof, he counted leagues to White Harbor. Edge of the known world, gateway to the sea. Beyond that lay the shivering gulf with storms tall enough to swallow Cog's whole. And beyond storms the Blackwater rush with its shoals and breakers. And beyond those, finally, Dragonstone. Cradle of Targaryen conquest, furnace of living fire. And cradled within that furnace, Stormfire. Each mile felt like a pulse in Jon's chest. Steady, insistent. He saw the journey as a long vein drawing him toward a beating heart, 200 leagues south and east. The farther he rode, the stronger the throb beneath his sternum. It was not imagination. In dreams he felt the dragon's breath settling in his lungs, warming him from within. He inhaled now, tasting ash and salt that were half memory, half prophecy. At dusk, they crossed the white knife by lantern light. the river's black water flecked with drifting shards of ice. A shuttered ferry swayed in frigid eddies like a coffin given to the tide. The ferryman cursed their timing but accepted 2 silver stags from Jory without question. He swung the rope pulley hand over hand, face hidden in a hood crusted white with rime. Midstream, Jon peered over the gunwale into the current. Moon refracted across shards of ice, twisting them into scales of emerald and gold. The vision left him breathless. White Harbor's walls loomed at midnight, lanterns bobbing atop watchtowers. Trumpets called challenge. Jory bellowed the countersign Robb had given him. Winter's hope. Gates groaned wide enough for 3 horses abreast. The smell of fish guts and tar wrapped Jon like wet cloth. Lord Wyman Manderley, roused from slumber, greeted them in a gilded antechamber thick with smoke from whale oil lamps. His jowled face looked weary but kind. "You ride late and hard," the Lord observed, pouring hippocras into goblets. "News from Winterfell?" "Inspection of Eastwatch garrisons," Hallis supplied, repeating the lie with practiced ease. "Sir Eliezer Thorne requested lists of arms. We carry them." Manderley nodded, though eyes lingered on Jon's face. "I see no parchment pouches." Jon met his gaze steadily. "Written memoranda would frost into pulp by the time we reached Eastwatch. We carry the tallies in memory." Astonishing memory for such numbers. The Lord chuckled, pouring more wine than Jon could stomach. "Well, I will not pry. But know this, Braavosi galleys docked 2 days past. They fly no sigil, claim to be traders in saffron and silk. My harbor master says their holds smell more of oil than spice. They ask after rents in the old Targaryen stronghold, Dragonstone." Jon's knuckles whitened around the goblet stem. "What answer did you give?" "That the island holds naught but gulls and ghosts." Manderley's smile faded. "Still, I strengthened the harbor watch, just in case." He leaned closer, voice dropping. "If Dragonstone stirs, the world will feel the tremor." Jon forced himself to take a measured sip. "We sail on the morning tide. Best we be away before they ask more questions." Manderley arranged discreet passage on the Silver Dawn, a Nor captained by Lady Dorna, a taciturn woman with salt-crusted hair bound in a tail. Dawn's hold smelled of spruce and sheep tallow, her sails patched but serviceable. Under cover of fog they slipped down the white knife into open sea, leaving White Harbor's lighthouse a dwindling ruby ember against steel sky. The Gulf greeted them with snarling waves that hammered the hull like fists. Jon spent hours bent over the gunwale, retching until his ribs ached. Ghost paced the deck unfazed, crimson eyes reflecting lightning that lashed the horizon. Jory steadied Jon when the ship pitched. Hallis prayed aloud to the Seven, voice thin in the wind. Lady Dorna barked orders through a speaking trumpet, unflinching even when a rogue wave smashed the larboard rail to splinters. On the 4th night, seas calmed enough that stars emerged, wheeling ice bright overhead. Jon pressed palms to rough deck planks, grounding himself, then closed his eyes. Inside he sought the ember he always felt while dreaming. It flared, sudden, vibrant, as if Stormfire stood a hand's breadth away. Jon's lids snapped open. Across the sky, an arc of green fire traced the firmament. An errant shard of northern light, bright as new-forged bronze. The sailors murmured, crossing hearts. "He sees us," Jon whispered. Jory crouched beside him. "Who?" "Our dragon," Hallis answered, voice reverent, though he had never laid eyes on the creature. "He calls his rider." 2 dawns later, the Silver Dawn made Braavos jade waters for fresh water and false paperwork. Lady Dorna anchored in a secluded inlet, while Jon and Jory rowed ashore, disguised as fur traders. Narrow canals wound between marble colossi. Brine stank thick. In a sunless courtyard they met Miro the Corsair, an obese ebony merchant supposed to sell them letters of passage down the narrow sea. Miro's smile showed rot-speckled teeth as he accepted their coin, but when he turned to sign the document, 6 Braavosi bravos surged from doorways, blades glinting. "Kill the Northmen, take the wolf for ransom," the Corsair hissed. Ghost erupted from shadow, jaws clamping on the nearest bravo's sword arm. Steel clanged on cobbles. Jory drew steel, parrying a thrust aimed at Jon's gut. Hallis, hidden until then, barreled from the boat arch, shield up, shoulder slamming a bravo into the canal where he vanished with a splash and a scream. Jon ducked another lunge, rose inside the bravo's guard, and drove a dagger through his throat. Blood fanned crimson against moss-grown stone. When 3 lay dying and the rest fled, Merrow wept, sputtering offers of deeper coin. Jon took the letters of passage anyway, dropped red-streaked silver onto the man's ledger, and left him scrabbling in gore. They shoved off before midday tide, fearing reprisals. Lady Dorna cursed. City of Knives beneath her breath, and hoisted sail quick enough to tear stitching. The Nor slipped seaward under a sky bruised purple. From the stern Jon watched marble titans fade into haze, like white ghosts, dissolving in wine. Southward they ran before a stiff wind, skirting the ragged coastline of the stepstones. At night, Jon walked the deck, whispering to waves, coaxing Stormfire's presence through the bond. He felt flickers, bursts of hunger, violence, wonder, but distance muffled nuance. Sometimes he glimpsed a cavern lit by pulsing magma, wings stirring sparks. Sometimes he sensed other minds. Human, fearful, hovering at the edges, marveling and mistrusting in equal measure. On the 11th dawn since White Harbor, the sea smelled of sulfur. Jagged silhouettes rose from mist. The stone drum first, then the great keep carved into volcanic rock, its towers clawing a pewter sky. Dragonstone, Dutal. Closer. Jon saw smoke vents along slopes. Pale plumes drifted like restless spirits. Gull cries echoed off basalt. Sir Roderick met them at a hidden cove, beneath the broken tower of Windworm. Gray whiskers, feral in sea spray. 30 Stark men stood guard behind him, axes in fists. Their eyes widened at sight of Ghost, wider still when Jon disembarked. Roderick clasped Jon's arms with bruising relief. By the old gods, lad, you rode faster than rumors. Good. He jerked thumb upslope. Our boy's restless. Eats thrice a day, fights his steel cage, roars loud enough to rattle lintels. We lost 2 fingers trying to mend a broken link. Jon swallowed. Take me to him. They climbed a switchback path slick with algae. Sulfur thickened, pricking Jon's sinuses. Basalt staircases spiraled through toppled archways, torches sputtering. They passed a chamber where men hammered iron plating to patch a breach. Claw marks raked the walls, deep gouges as long as a man's arm. Through a final arch, they entered the main forge hall, its roof long collapsed to expose slate sky. Heat blasted Jon like an oven door flung wide. Pools of molten rock glimmered in cracks across the floor, casting molten red glow on everything. Chains rattled from the far end. Ship anchor chains, links fatter than a man's wrist, attached to a collar of blackened steel bolted around a massive basalt pillar. The collar lay empty now, snapped clean through. Jon's heart leapt. Then thunder struck. A roar shook dust from shattered rafters. Stormfire emerged from behind a fallen buttress, no longer a hatchling but a sinuous predator longer than 2 wagons end to end. Emerald scales rippled like hammered armor, each edged with copper. Wings tucked, his shoulders rose higher than Jon's head. His eyes burned molten gold shot through with ruby glints. Smoke curled from flared nostrils. A single loose scale, the size of a shield, clung to his cheek. Half shed. Time stopped. Jon stepped forward, chest tight with wonder and terror. Stormfire cocked his head, pupils narrowing to slits. Men backed away, some crossing themselves. Ghost padded to Jon's flank, hackles prickling. The dragon inhaled, deep, slow, and exhaled a plume of steam across the floor. Lava pools rippled. Jon's throat worked. He raised a gloveless hand, palm outward. Heat singed hairs on his arm. I'm here, friend, he murmured in Valyrian. Ziri ixis nike. I am myself. Stormfire's wings unfurled with a leathery snap, spanning more than twice the width of the hall. Glowing vents in the membrane traced branching veins. The dragon advanced 1 step, talons clacking stone, then another. Jon's heart hammered like storm drums, yet he did not retreat. A low rumble, half growl, half purr, vibrated the floor. Stormfire lowered his head until steaming breath washed over Jon's face. The heat was searing yet somehow welcoming, like stepping straight into a summer dawn. Jon placed his palm to the dragon's brow. Scales scorched his skin, but he did not flinch. Memory surged, not his, but Stormfire's. The cold dark egg, heartbeat echoing Jon's own. First breath of fire in the rookery. Taste of goat blood on snow. Smell of pine. Sting of salty wind. The longing emptiness when crate walls closed. Jon gasped. Tears stung his eyes, evaporating instantly. He leaned his forehead against the warm scale. Never again will you be caged. With a chuff astonishingly gentle, Stormfire nudged him backward, then rubbed his massive head along Jon's torso like a cat mark scenting its kitten. Armor buckles seared, but Jon laughed anyway, an unrestrained sound that echoed up broken walls. Sir Rodrik exhaled. 7, take me. It worked. Jory and Hallis lowered swords they hadn't realized were half drawn. Flames danced merrily in the lava pools, as though celebrating. For 2 days Jon did little but remain with Stormfire. He shared raw venison haunches, fed by tongs until the dragon recognized his scent on the meat and accepted offerings from his hands. He scaled the dragon's shoulders, guiding wings to stretch in measured counts, while men perched high with ropes to catch falling debris. The beast learned to bow his head at a whispered command, to exhale flame only when Jon tapped 2 fingers on a talon. The bond grew taut as silk, subtle, resilient, responsive. But outside the forge walls, trouble brewed. Scouts atop the stone drum's parapets sighted sails painted red and black. 3 slender triremes prowling just beyond catapult range. Their figureheads bore the Bravosi moon, yet masts flew Lysini pennants. Seahorse rampant. Sir Rodrik believed them, sellsword raiders paid to snatch the dragon. Lys was notorious for such ventures. He doubled night watches, posted ballistae on every turret. One twilight, wind flayed the sea to white foam. Jon stood on the parapet beside Rodrik, ghost at his heel, cloak snapping. Torches below cast trembling halos. Ships keep distance, but boats patrol closer each dusk, Rodrik said, pointing to faint silhouettes bobbing beyond surf. They test our reach. Then tomorrow we show them our reach outstrips theirs, Jon replied, fingers stroking Stormfire's scale token at his belt. At dawn he saddled a makeshift harness across the dragon's shoulders, a lattice of boiled leather and thick rope loops, anchored to a polished plate bolted behind the neck ridges. 24 men had cut and stitched through the night by forge fire. They warned it might snap first glide. Jon simply nodded. In the courtyard Jon mounted, while snowflakes drifted like ash. Stormfire shook giants' bones, wings raising a gale that scattered embers. Ghost howled, tail high. Men scrambled clear. Jon leaned low along the sinuous spine, fists wrapped round a rope bridle. He whispered, "Fly." Stormfire launched. Stone shattered under claw thrust. Wings hammered air, vaulting them skyward in a gut-wrenching surge. Jon's heart slammed his ribs, yet exhilaration roared louder than fear. They cleared the tower by 10 feet, snow whipping past like silver needles. Wind shrieked. Stormfire angled southeast, toward sunrise blooming blood-red. Below, basalt peaks shrank. The sea sprawled endless gray. The dragon banked, banking again into a long descending curve. Jon's stomach dropped. He glimpsed 3 Lyseni longboats cutting toward a shoal, 40 oars each. "Dracarys," Jon whispered. The only command truly needed. Green fire gushed from Stormfire's throat. Hotter than any forge, a beam of liquid emerald laced with white heart. It seared through cloud, raked across the first boat. Hull timbers exploded in a cherry-bright plume. Men dove screaming into boiling surf that reeked of pitch and roasting flesh. Flame splashed like oil onto the second craft. Sailcloth ignited, mast toppled. The third boat veered wildly, oars thrashing. Stormfire beat wings once, twice, gaining height, then folded them tight. They dropped like a thrown spear. Jon's eyes streamed. At the last instant, Stormfire spread wings, arresting fall and sending a shockwave that capsized the vessel with brute wind, alone. Jon turned the dragon's head back to the castle. Ballista crews on the walls raised spears in salute. Stormfire ascended, spiraling around the stone drum in jubilant arcs, trumpeting a call that rattled ancient gargoyles from ledges. When they settled in the courtyard, men cheered raggedly, disbelief melting into fierce pride. Sir Roderick met Jon's dismount, mouth agape, porten dry. By the seven, we are unstoppable. Not unstoppable, Jon replied, voice rasped raw from wind, but feared. Let that rumor spread, and such fleets may think twice. Then on. That night, they feasted in Dragonstone's cavernous great hall, whose vaulted ceiling still bore faded murals of black dragons on red fields. Roast goat, oily fish, barrels of Stormland's beer seized from a captured supply skiff. Scarce provisions tasted like king's fare in the glow of new hope. Jon sat at head of table besides Roderick, his cheeks ruddy. Yet even as he drank, he watched the seaward windows, ever wary. 3 days passed without new sails, but ravens from the north brought ominous news. Robert Baratheon had died of his hunting wounds wrought outside King's Landing. Cersei held the throne in regency for her firstborn. But rumblings said Stannis Baratheon marched banners toward the capital claiming rightful succession. Ned Stark was missing. Some claimed imprisoned, others executed. Jon's goblet slipped from numb fingers, wine pooling. Roderick caught his wrist. Steady, lad. My father. Gone. We do not know yet. Roderick's jaw clenched. Raven said only that the hand was seized on charges of treason. He spat. Southern lies. Jon rose abruptly, ghost of heat pulsing against his chest where Stormfire's presence now rested like an extra heart. I ride for the north. Through Lannister lands? Alone? Impossible. Not alone. With fire. Roderick's brow furrowed. Fly a dragon across half the realm? Armies will loose quarrels. The beast tires. Then we strike at night. I know the godswood paths. We skirt lines. Jon's eyes burned. We must find my father, or avenge him. Ghost whined, sensing the storm within. Stormfire outside roared an echo, as if through stone. Roderick bowed his head, the old knight weighing loyalty and logic. At last he looked up. Give me 1 fortnight to fortify this rock, then I ride with you, others too. North can't spare its wolf dragon now, but if dire need stands, we follow. Jon exhaled, fists unclenching. A fortnight then. Those 14 days stormed by in whirlwinds of preparation. Masons bricked ballista platforms. Smiths reforged anchor chains into flight chains, sized for Stormfire's ever-thickening neck. Scribes copied reports of Lannister troop movements gleaned by hawk-sighted scouts. Jon rode the dragon daily at dawn and dusk, testing endurance, perfecting steep dives, training breaths into cones rather than wide gouts. Precision flame. He learned to shift weight in the saddle, so that each lean signaled pitch and yaw. Sometimes the bond did the work. His mere intent seemed to flow into Stormfire's muscles before rein twitched. At night, he dreamed of Ned, bound, gaunt, yet unbroken, standing beneath the Red Keep's bones. And he dreamed of Arya running with pack of children through King's Landing Skull Isle, and of Cersei's emerald gaze catching sight of wings far above. In every dream, snowflakes fell even inside the great hall, and flames guttered only to bloom green again. On the 13th night, a raven arrived near midnight, hammering bloody talons against the rookery grate as though chased by death itself. Jon and Roderick read by torch. The seal, black wax stamped with direwolf. Robb Stark. Jon. Father arraigned in great sept at first light. They will name him traitor. Lannisters hold him. I march south with Tallheart, Hornwood, Glover. Winterfell stands for the king in the north if father falls. But blades alone may fail. If you have strength unseen, strike now. Rob. Jon crushed the parchment. Dawn was hours away. If Ned still lived, morning might see swords sever flesh. There was no time for armies. He strode for the courtyard. Stormfire lay curled around a lava vent, wings rising and falling like blacksmith bellows. Lanterns flickered as Jon approached. The dragon's eye snapped open, slit pupil widening to take him in. Jon's thoughts raced. Could they reach the capital in time? Dragonstone to Blackwater Bay spanned 60 leagues of open water, half a day by swift galley, perhaps less by wing if winds favored them. A hand on his shoulder. Rodrik. The knight pressed a bundle into Jon's hands. Maps, dried meat, an obsidian dagger. You may save him where armies cannot. Jon met the old man's gaze. Hold this fortress. Protect who follows. Ace the Mander protected the trident. Rodrik vowed. Fist on heart. Hallis and Jory materialized, both harnessed like riders. You'll need blades when you land, Jory said. Hallis just nodded grimly. Jon shook head. Weight slows flight. One passenger only. He clasped their wrists in turn. Guide Rob should I fail. He donned boiled leather helm lined with sheep fleece, buckled sword at hip. From the shadows Ghost trotted, accepting Jon's embrace. Guard the keep, Jon whispered, but the wolf whined refusal. Jon sighed. Very well, come then. He swung atop Stormfire's shoulders, settling into the saddle grooves carved in scale. Ghost leapt, scrambling up the dragon's flank to crouch just behind Jon's back, claws hooking loops sewn for that purpose. Crewmen hauled open the courtyard's iron-reinforced gates. Sea wind streamed in, carrying the thunder scent of approaching storm. Jon whispered into the membrane of Stormfire's ear frill. To my father. The dragon surged upward with a clap like thunder. Basalt parapets fell away in blur. They climbed through rain clouds, wings shedding water in hissing sheets. Lightning spidered sky to east. Stormfire roared back at the heavens, flame licking from jaws. Jon leaned forward, urging speed. The dragon answered, muscles rippling beneath saddle as they arrowed northwest, toward a faint glow of city lights on the horizon. Blackwater Bay opened below, inky mirror reflecting storm's fury. Galleys bobbed at moorings near the rush, their lanterns looked like scattered pearls. Stormfire banked hard, descending fast enough Jon's ears popped. Wind tore tears from his eyes. He sighted the red keep, monstrous silhouette on Aegon's high hill, towers spearing low clouds. Bells began clanging, either early dawn prayers or warning of incoming terror. Jon touched the dragon's neck ridge twice. Stormfire drew in breath, chest bulging. Flame guttered along teeth. They skimmed rooftops, tile shattering under downdraft. Sentries on ramparts scattered. Arrows streaked upward. Most fell short, some clanged off scale, harmless. They circled the great sept of Baelor, white domes luminous under torchlight. A crowd thronged the square. Thousands pressed shoulder to shoulder in dark mass, torches bobbing like swamp fleas. In their midst, a raised platform, scaffold. Jon's blood iced. He saw a kneeling figure, gray hair matted, wrists bound. Ned Stark. Time bent. Jon guided Stormfire into a steep dive straight at the square. Bells tolled out of rhythm now, panic over faith. The dragon's scream split dawn apart. Torches guttered in blast of wind. People shrieked, stampeding. Royal guards looked up too late. Dracarys. Jon roared. Stormfire spewed a jet of green-white flame that painted cobbles with liquid emerald. It fanned out to either side of the platform, incinerating wooden pikes, melting spearheads, yet narrowly spared the raised stage where the kneeling man remained unharmed. Heat forced men to their knees. Smoke billowed dense. Jon jerked rinds. Stormfire braked with colossal wing beats, landing amid fractured flagstones. Ghost leapt from the saddle, hackles bristling, lips wrinkled in a silent snarl. Jon vaulted down, boots slamming stone. He strode through settling ash toward the platform. Joffrey Baratheon, crown askew, stood frozen, lips parted. Cersei next to him, face drained of color, emerald eyes huge. Sir Ilan Payne had his greatsword half raised, but stared slack-jawed at the dragon, whose claws gouged 10-foot trenches in marble steps. Jon ignored them, mounting the platform in 2 bounds. He fell to his knees beside Ned, who blinked as if waking from a fever dream. "Father," Jon breathed. Ned's voice rasped like paper. "Jon, am I dreaming?" "No, not today." Jon slashed ropes with a dagger. Ned's wrists bled. Jon hauled him up. Stormfire's presence loomed behind, rumbling like distant avalanche, keeping crowds at bay. Gold cloaks hesitated, shields quivering. The King's Guard arrayed uncertainly. Sir Meryn Trant took a half step, only to falter when Stormfire snapped jaws inches from his breastplate. Cersei found her tongue first, voice sharp as cracking ice. "Kill them. A dragon in the capital is treason." But no soldier moved. Jon lifted his father onto the dragon's lowered foreleg. Ghost bounded up after. Stormfire crouched, wings opening with snapping banners of membrane. Arrows rattled onto scales. One embedded near Jon's boot, then caught fire and melted. With a final beat that flung men and banners like rag dolls, Stormfire leapt skyward. Jon clutched his father tight. Below, the square dissolved into chaos. Guards shouting, citizens screaming prayers, the Queen shrieking orders lost in roar of wings. They cleared rooftops, climbing into storm-torn dawn. Ned clung weakly, hair whipping. "I thought I'd never see you again," he murmured. "Neither did I," Jon replied, tears mixing with rain. Stormfire banked over the Blackwater, heading east toward safe sky. Behind, bells rang frantic, echoing futile rage. Within Jon's chest, 2 hearts hammered, the bastards and the dragons, each beat forging new legend, winter's wolf riding fire's wing, turning darkest hour into ember-bright dawn. And as clouds swallowed them, Jon knew the world would never again be free of their shadow, nor of their light. The storm swallowed them whole. The moment Stormfire's wings tore free of the palace wind, rain lashing against emerald scale, with the furious persistence of thrown daggers. Jon pressed his brow against his father's, anchoring Ned with a forearm cinched behind his shoulders, while Ghost crouched between them, white tail whipping in the gale. Every surge of the dragon's great muscles reverberated through Jon's ribs, and each wing beat felt like a forge hammer shaping molten sky. They climbed until the towers of King's Landing blurred beneath a river of cloud, their flickering torchlight dimming to dull embers swallowed by distance. Only when the sprawl of the city became a smudge on the horizon did Jon risk loosening his grip. Ned sagged into the crook of his arm, breath ragged but steady. Blood seeped through the torn fabric at his wrists, smearing upon Jon's leathers, steaming under the dragon's radiating heat. Jon tore a length of cloak from his shoulder with teeth and trembling hand, wrapping the wounds as best he could. Rain hissed against Stormfire's scales but rolled away before droplets could cling. The dragon's hide boiled them to mist. Lightning forked behind, illuminating for an eye-searing instant the scars of siege works on the city's walls, and the confusion spreading through its streets. Bells still tolled faintly through the cloud banks, their dissonant clang a rumor now, no more threatening than distant thunder. Jon pressed lips to his father's ear to be heard above the wind. "Hold fast. We fly for the God's Eye. There's cover and fresh water in the oaks." Ned managed a slow nod, his eyes closing. He would not waste breath on questions. That steadied Jon more than any word of comfort could. He shifted in the saddle, feeling the wet leather squeak beneath his thighs, and tapped 2 fingers against Stormfire's ridge in the pattern they had practiced. The dragon banked east toward dawn's bruised glow, painting the undersides of the clouds a lurid copper. Jon forced himself to breathe with the creature's rhythm. Inhale on the downsweep of those titanic wings, exhale on the up. And little by little the shaking in his limbs eased. Below, the King's Road unspooled like a muddied ribbon through dark woods. Wagons scattered in frantic disorder. Columns of armed men lurched toward the city's gates, their torchlines twisting in panic. Jon glimpsed clusters breaking apart, some racing south, others throwing down pikes and pelting into glades. A gout of dragonfire would have turned the road to glass. Once, The thought of such power might have tempted him, but now it kindled only a cold ache. He had stolen his father from death's door, and he had no right to squander that miracle on vengeance. Stormfire's long tail clipped a thunderhead, sending shards of ice singing past Joan's hood. The dragon churned higher, wings cracking like sails, until the clouds thinned into a gray sea-lit saffron from beneath. The sun had not yet breached the horizon, but its promise gilded every droplet suspended in the air. Jon dared a glance at the battered bindings encircling Ned's torso. Ropes had bitten so deep he could see the bruises blossoming even through the rain-soaked linen. He unstoppered his waterskin, poured a trickle over the lacerations, tearing strips of his tunic to pad beneath the torn cloak fabric. There was little more he could do in flight. Time blurred. He lost track of the wing beats and the leagues consumed beneath them. He marked only moments by points in the sky. The last star of the hunter fading, the dullening of the moon, until it was nothing but an exhausted smear of light, the horizon brightening from wine dark to smoky rose. At length, shadows thinned below, revealing the idle expanse of the Blackwater Rush, giving way to vast tracts of scrub, and farther on, the tangled forests veiling the riverlands. Jon guided Stormfire toward a crescent of hills draped in ancient oak, a place he recalled from maps wrought-inked with Maester's care, an unnamed spur between the King's Road and the Trident, seldom patrolled, rich with freshwater pool. He signaled descent. The dragon folded wings, slipping beneath the low cloud bank in near silence despite his bulk. Branches trembled like struck harp strings where downdraft brushed treetops. Jon selected a clearing ringed by dolmen-like stones, perhaps the remains of an age-lost shrine, and tensed his thighs. Stormfire flared his wings and landed, talons shearing ruts the size of grave trenches in the soft loam. Ned groaned as the jolt shuddered through him. Ghost sprang down first, pacing the perimeter nose low, hackles bristling, breath steaming. Jon slid off, nearly dropping to one knee, when sensation returned in a painful rush to half-frozen legs. He eased Ned to the ground against a mossy boulder and drew his dagger to slice away the rope still dangling from his father's wrists. "Drink," he urged, lifting the waterskin to cracked lips. Ned swallowed, then coughed shallowly, face drawn taut from pain but framed by iron resolve. He tried to speak. Jon hushed him, laying a hand gently atop his shoulder. "Rest first. Words later." Stormfire prowled nearby among the stones, tail lashing in slow arcs, nostrils twitching as he sampled the scents of damp earth and leaf mold. Jon watched the dragon's gait, still fluid, no sign of favoring wing or limb. He had feared fatigue would slow the beast, yet Stormfire seemed invigorated by the long flight, as though outracing the sunrise had quickened his blood. He stretched one wing to its full span, membranes shimmering with dew, then settled beside the largest stone and folded into a wary crouch, head raised, sentinel straight. Jon scavenged fallen branches half-rotted by winter wet, snapping them over his knee and arranging a small fire. Sparks refused at first. His flint was sodden. Ghost reappeared with a bundle of half-dry twig in his maw and dropped it before Jon, tail thrumming at the praise that followed. With persistent strikes, the tinder caught. Jon coaxed flame from ember to thin column of smoke, shielding it with his body from the breeze. The glow cast Ned's face in warm relief. Color returned slowly to his cheeks. "Rob?" Ned rasped, voice hoarse as cracked parchment. "Marching south," Jon answered, placing a strip of salted goat to warm on a flat stone by the fire. He kept his tone even. "He holds the banners of the north. You were seized the night you sent the last raven to us." "Menanderhaus." "I feared as much. I tried to warn him." Ned's gaze drifted to Stormfire. "Your doing. Our doing." Jon settled beside him, breaking the goat into chew-sized pieces. He handed one, watched as Ned mustered the will to eat. Roderick remained at Dragonstone with a garrison. The dragon would not wait longer. Rumor of him grew by the hour. So I heard. Inside the dungeons, Joffrey raved that a monster stole his city's breath. I thought it wine madness. Ned's mouth quirked despite exhaustion. Seems some wine-mad dreams prove true. Jon extended another piece of meat. We can reach Dragonstone by dusk if weather allows. There you can heal. After, we decide together. Ned looked beyond the fire at the hulking silhouette of Stormfire and the sleek wolf standing guard by his foreclaw. We unleashed a hammer the world has not felt in a lifetime. Every crown will weigh this day heavily. Every crown. Jon swallowed. Across the corridor of sky from King's Landing, horns would already be summoning council. Lannister gold whispering of monstrous rebellion. Baratheon brothers calculating gambits. Tyrell courtiers composing flattery for whichever side shone brightest in the coming dawn. And in the far north, Robb's columns treaded stone and swamp with winter at their backs. The weight of it pressed on Jon's shoulders, yet he bore it easier than he might have before the dragon's bond. Fire changed more than flesh. It melted hesitation, cauterized fretful doubt. Morning advanced. Mist coiled away from the clearing, unveiling slanted pillars of sunlight that drifted between the oaks like cathedral beams. Ned tried and failed to stand. The wound in his side reopened, soaking linen red. Jon bound it tighter, whispering the old prayers. The ones old Nan muttered for scraped knees, and the rare times she looked afraid. Stormfire watched with unblinking eyes, tiny tongues of flame dancing between his teeth, each time Ned hissed with pain. Jon felt the echo of that concern. Not exactly Stormfire's emotion, but a sympathetic note resonating through the bond. He too recognized the elder wolf as pack and wounded. By midday Jon judged Ned fit enough to travel. He fashioned a sling seat of braided rope, looping it beneath the saddle girths so his father could rest against Jon's chest without bearing his own weight. Before lifting him, he pressed a cold iron knife into Ned's belt. "In case," was all he said. Ned's answer was the faintest nod. Ghost bounded up the dragon's tail almost before Jon reached for him, settling into his accustomed perch with paws gripping a ridge. Jon mounted, his thighs sliding into grooves worn smooth over weeks of training, and secured Ned in the sling. He touched his heels lightly behind Stormfire's shoulder joint, a signal of caution rather than speed, and felt the immediate bunch of muscle as the dragon gathered himself. Moments later they were aloft again, tree line falling away in a swirl of green and brown. Unlike the frantic escape, this flight adopted a measured pace just beneath Cloudlid, tracing the ribbon of the Blackwater east, then skimming southeast across the storm-rough bay. Stormfire's shadow rippled black upon whitecaps. Gulls scattered shrieking before the unnatural predator slicing their sky. Twice, distant sails veered when they spied his silhouette, keeling hard to change course. Jon noted their flags, one Braavosi, one Lannister red and gold, and marked the latter for future reckoning. He prayed they would carry word slower than Stormfire's wings. They reached Dragonstone as the sun sat heavy on the water, casting isles and seaweed shoals in molten gold. Smoke rose from the forges. Roderick's men still at work. A horn sounded thrice at their approach. Ballistae slewed to track them, then relaxed when the dragon's emerald hull glinted recognition. Stormfire swept the main courtyard in one great oval, descended, and landed with a thunderclap. Sparks leapt from furnace mouths at the blast of his downdraft. Men cheered. Some stared, mouths moving in silent prayer. Though they had seen him many times now, the awe never dulled. Roderick strode forward clad in soot-dark mail, tugging off gauntlets to expose scarred hands. He bowed formally to Ned first, eyes shining wet. "We feared the worst, my lord." "Your worst found wings," Ned murmured, offering a frail but grateful smile. Roderick signaled, and 4 men rushed to help lower him from the sling. They bore him toward the keep, where a makeshift infirmary awaited. Maester Coleman of the Vale had arrived 2 nights prior at Roderick's summons. Jon dismounted last, sliding down Stormfire's shoulder. The dragon lowered his head until Jon could press his forehead between the ridges. A shared breath passed. Salt, ash, seared linen. Jon whispered gratitude. Stormfire chuffed, then stalked toward the volcanic vents to bask. Roderick clapped Jon's shoulder. "King's Landing?" "Not ours," Jon replied. "But no longer theirs alone." He relayed the rescue in hushed tones until Roderick's bushy brows arched high. "The city teeters. Next steps will decide war or peace." "War, more like Roderick muttered. Gold lions don't forgive humiliation. He led Jon toward the inner ward. Messages pour in like river water. Stark bannermen contesting crossings along the Twins. Renly Baratheon crowns himself at Highgarden. Rose Lords shout his name. Stannis holds Storm's End yet scours seas for allies. The realm splits by the hour. Jon thought of the dragon's green flame reflecting in Joffrey's terrified eyes. Let them split. We forged something new from the break. For days Dragonstone pulsed with feverish activity. Smiths hammered fresh scale mail sized for riders. Coopers lined the inner courtyard with barrels of tallow and lamp oil. Makeshift bombs should the island face assault. Maester Coleman worked tirelessly over Ned's wounds, lancing infection, and leeching fever. Jon watched hours at a time, holding his father's hand while secrets poured out in fever-drunk whispers. The letter he had sent to Stannis revealing Cersei's bastards, the last promise made to Robert on his deathbed, the fear for Sansa held hostage in the Red Keep. Jon listened, heart splitting between pity and rage. He soaked cloths in cool water, smoothed gray hair damp with sweat, and told Ned of Robb's valor, of Stormfire's growth, of the old gods that still watched. Between vigils, Jon trained. Every dawn he and Stormfire circled the island, low passes to harry seabirds, shoulder-raking climbs to test draft at altitude. They practiced precise jets of fire, searing rune patterns into seaside cliffs that spelled ancient words of Valyrian homecoming. Jon learned to stand in the saddle at glide, balancing like a ship's masthead, while Stormfire banked. Ghost, jealous, took to crawling up Jon's back mid-flight, tail flicking his ear until Jon wrestled him into the crook of his arm lest he tumble. One violet dusk, as Jon returned from patrol, he found Ned seated upright in a courtyard chair draped in furs, pale but steady-eyed. A broth steamed on his lap. Maester Coleman hovered near muttering warnings about chill breezes. Ned dismissed him, beckoned Jon to Otto. When he spoke, his voice had regained something steel. I dream each night of Winterfell's hearth, he said. Its warmth never fades. But last night, the fire was green. His gaze flicked to Stormfire sunning atop a ruined battlement. Green like that storm you ride. Jon followed his stare. No green fire will touch Winterfell. That depends on the wind. Ned sighed. Robb will march regardless. He thinks me dead or soon to be. The north bleeds for my ghost. I will ride to him, Jon said at once. With dragon's roar? Ned shook his head. Appear overhead, and the phrase will scramble to whichever side promises thicker walls. He took Jon's hand. You must treat Stormfire as scalpel, not sword. Choose your cuts or carve your own throat. And now, they spoke long in the night. Strategy whispered beneath cinder-studded sky. Ned counseled caution. Seats of power rarely toppled by single stroke. Better to turn small hinges that swung heavier doors. He charged Jon with 3 tasks. Protect Robb's flank at the Twins, secure Sansa's release through leverage rather than siege, and above all, keep Dragonstone unbreached so a northern court in exile could endure if Winterfell fell. Jon accepted each, though the weight felt mountain solid. At first light he wrote to Robb, sending the letter by Raven with Roderick's cipher. He vowed he would join at Moat Cailin, bringing proof of their father's rescue. He included a single emerald scale as token, one that gleamed with oily hues in torchlight, and advised patience until the wolf met the dragon at the neck. The Raven launched into pink dawn, wings beating due north. That same morning, Braavosi spies probed Dragonstone's shore, disguised as fishermen. They were seized by sentries, their skiff dragged beyond tide line. Jon interrogated them personally, Stormfire looming behind like a green-scaled wall. Under that baleful gaze, tongues loosed quickly. They served a consortium of Pentoshi merchants, financed by Queen Cersei's quartermasters, tasked to locate, and, if possible, neutralize the Stark worm. Jon let them keep their lives, but sent them blindfolded on a dinghy stuffed with charred driftwood carved into draconic fangs, a gift to deliver with chilling tale. 2 nights later, the first storm of summer rolled off the narrow sea, a colossal thunderhead that lashed Dragonstone with sheets of warm rain and hurled whitecaps against basalt cliffs. Jon decided it the perfect curtain for departure. He strapped fresh stores, dried figs, salted lamb, 2 small casks of sweet water, to the saddle harness. Roderick tried to argue for a larger escort, but Ned's earlier counsel rang: scalpel, not sword. Jon allowed only Hallis Malin, a hard rider with bowshot eyes, to accompany on a swift courser via land along the coast. Stormfire would fly alone beneath cloud. Ned emerged to see them off, leaning heavily on a cane carved from weirwood branch, found adrift by Stormfire's vent. Rain glazed his beard silver. He clasped Jon's head, foreheads touching in silent benediction. When he stepped back, his smile was an old thing Jon barely remembered. Pride untainted by duty's weight. Stormfire launched through sheeting rain with a roar muffled by cloud. Lightning danced around his wings yet never struck. As Jon guided into the storm belly, electric blue flickered across scale ridges, making him glow like a living constellation. The world ceded shape to cloud, then parted in sudden pockets where glimpses of coastline flashed. Torches at sharp point, flickering beacons of Massey's Hook, the ghost white line of Storm's End's cliff bastions. Jon adjusted bearings, leaning into the northeast drag of wind until rippled farmland of the Crownlands swept by far below. They flew non-stop until muscles in Jon's back stiffened and Stormfire's breath grew ragged cones of steam. Past the rush's headwaters he steered them to a low ridge blanketed in heather where wild sheep scattered before searing gusts of exhausted dragonfire. There they rested, huddled under Stormfire's half-sheltered wing, while rain hammered the hillside. Jon gnawed dried fig and shared scraps of lamb with Ghost. Stormfire devoured 2 of the sheep whole, crunching bones like brittle twigs. Thunder stormed westward, leaving only the hush of drizzling dusk and the occasional bleat of distant ewes bereft of kin. On the morrow, they crossed the rolling green sea of the Riverlands. Smoke columns scarred the horizon where raiding bands had torched villages. No doubt Lannister outriders skirmishing against Tully holdings. Jon circled high, scouting. Each new plume of soot stoked anger, but he forced restraint. Storms lose fury when discharged on every breeze. Justice demanded precision. At midday he spied an armored column with twin lion banners trudging north along the western bank of the Blue Fork. Near 200 strong guide. They marched with captives roped to central wagons, mostly small folk by their garb. Jon banked Stormfire into cloud cover, tracking them for miles, waiting until they bivouacked at a wooded bend. When twilight hardened the air, he descended in silence. Ghost leapt free mid-descent, racing into underbrush to free prisoners. Jon signaled Stormfire with a whistle pitched like wind through canyons. The dragon circled once, then fell like a spear. Talons spread. The first enemy Jon targeted was their baggage train. Barrels of oil, bundles of crossbow bolts. One gout of green flame ignited it all, turning the bend into a furnace. Panic rippled through the camp. Men scrambled for bows, but their strings sagged wet. Quarrels never left rails. Jon directed measured bursts, severing supply lines, collapsing makeshift corrals, yet he never once aimed flame at man directly. Terror sufficed. While soldiers scattered to the tree line, Ghost surged from shadows, slashing rope after rope, shepherding the captives toward the river shallows. Jon dismounted amid the chaos long enough to cut the last knot from an old woman's bound wrists. Her cracked lips formed silent thanks. He pressed a waterskin to them. By the time he remounted, the Lannister ranks had collapsed into a rout. He let them flee. The freed small folk, including 3 children and a one-armed baker, foraged across the shallows where Hallis Malin and 4 scouts awaited, having trailed from King's Landing by horse. Jon left them in Hallis's care with instructions to shepherd the survivors to River Run, to Robb's encampment if possible. Hallis saluted with rain-streaked salute. Ghost wheeled back to the dragon's side, muzzle stained with rope fibers, eyes bright. The next 3 days dizzied Jon with skirmish and rescue. Word of the Green Demon traveled on every refugee's tongue, bolstered by rumor into legend. Some said he breathed wildfire stolen from Arius vaults, others that he carried an icy rider who could turn men to shadow. It mattered little which version lived, fear reaped spoils. Near Maidenpool, he raised a Lannister siege tower under construction. North of Harrenhal, he set ablaze an ammunition depot, disguised as a grain silo. Yet still, he kept Ned's warning in heart, never loosing dragonfire on living flesh, save in one dire moment. A squad of sellsword crossbowmen cornered 6 blacksmith's apprentices, hiding in a burnt farmstead. Their leader leveled a flaming bolt at one girl, no older than Arya. Jon let Stormfire loose. A needle jet of white-hot flame vaporized bolt, bow, and half the man's arm. The sellswords collapsed screaming, unclutching weapons. Jon landed only long enough to lead the apprentices to a stream where he quenched their smoldering clothes, then hurried on. At last, the neck's marshy fragrance reached his nostrils. Peat, standing water, and faint sweetness of flowering bog myrtle. He followed a winding route across causeways known only to crannogmen, alighting each dusk on grassy hummocks, barely large enough for Stormfire's weight. With each passing mile, the cold breath of late spring gathered frost in the night hours. Dawns glittered with thin ice on stagnant pools. Ghosts kept close, nose wrinkling at lizard lion spoor. Jon wrapped arms around Stormfire's warm neck while sleeping in the saddle to preserve heat. One pale sunrise he crested a ridge of reeds and froze. Beyond stretched an army's expanse. Banners of gray direwolf snapping in brisk wind. Columns of spearmen in fur-lined cloaks, rows of pike bristling like a thicket under frost. At the center a temporary fort of timber and earthen berm rose. Robb's camp at Moat Cailin. Scouts on the outer ring caught sight of the dragon's silhouette and signaled alarm horns. But Robb himself, recognizable by the silver gleam of his headband and the proud, if weary tilt of his shoulders, rode forward beneath the gate's newly raised portcullis. Jon guided Stormfire into a slow glide, descending enough to sweep the field with downdraft that flattened pennants. Knights' horses reared, men cursed prayers. Robb alone held his mount steady, blue eyes wide yet resolute. Jon dismounted a stone's throw away, raising empty palms. "Brother," he called, voice ragged with wind and weather. A hush blanketed the causeway. Ghost trotted forward, nose bumping Robb's knee in greeting. Robb swung down from saddle, boots squelching in half-frozen mud, and crossed to Jon. For a heartbeat, they only stared at each other. Stark and Snow, childhood half-brothers now measured by war's mileposts. Then Robb crushed Jon in an embrace that clanked breastplates. Behind, soldiers exhaled as though sure calamity had been averted. Whispers flew. "He rode a dragon to rescue the Lord?" "Aye, the Lord Stark lives. Swear I saw his sigil." Jon offered brief assurance. Ned was safe, recovering, and gave orders to treat Robb as commander in the north. He produced Ned's own seal and letter, ink still bright, though corners curled by flight's damp, affirming loyalty and outlining next moves. Robb's shoulders eased under the weight of renewed hope. They retreated into the fort's command tent as Stormfire settled on a berm outside, blanketed by wonderstruck guards, who dared inch closer only when the beast's eyelids drooped. Inside, lamplight flickered upon map-strewn tables. Lords Greyjohn, Karstark, and Glover crowded in, some nodding at Jon, others eyeing him like a half-tamed blade. Jon spoke hours, of Ned's captivity, of Joffrey's false charges, of green flames scalding the Sept Square. He detailed troop numbers gleaned from sky reconnaissance, Lannister columns arrayed near Harrenhal, Tyrell banners massing in Reach Plains, Stannis warships lurking near Cape Wrath. He distributed scribbled sketches of supply caravans, sighting times, and potential ambush lanes. The lords devoured the information, some in awe, some with skepticism, but none could deny the accuracy when scouts confirmed sightings within days. Robb tapped the haft of a coal-black knife on the map. One dragon cannot win every battle, but one dragon at the right place may fracture the lion's spine. He traced a path toward the twins. Freys demand ransom to cross. They will squeeze our host until winter's teeth close. But if we own the sky? Jon anticipated. Stormfire carries me and perhaps one other. But his flame can clear a gate as wide as a river. A show of force may win passage without burning plank. He spoke slower now, measuring each vow. Yet we must wield fear without cruelty. Father insists. And, Father always insisted. Robb's mouth slanted in a wry half-smile, but he nodded. Together, they devised the plan. Jon would circle high above the twins at dawn on the appointed day, igniting the waters of the Green Fork in a pattern just visible to those on the ramparts, a dragon-drawn sigil of the Deerwolf's head. Walder Frey, shrewd and skittish, would understand the message. Open the gates or risk a second burning that might topple stone. No blood need spill. In the days leading toward the maneuver, Jon rested. Stormfire gorged on sides of venison provided by grateful quartermasters, then slept under canvas awnings sewn together from 20 tents. Jon visited the healers' pavilions where scar-lined men reached to touch his hand, as though such contact could pass along courage, or perhaps luck. He told them luck was a coward's talisman. Only fury and love kept him astride the beast. At night, he walked the perimeter with Grey Wind at his side, Robb's direwolf matching ghost, stride for stride, two shadows against bonfire embers. They came to silent understanding. Pack boundaries extended skyward now. Finally, the appointed dawn arrived, shrouded in silver mist. Jon saddled Stormfire at the river cliff, half a league south of the twins. Robb rode up, Helman Tallheart and Mage Mormont in tow, each offering last-minute counsel. Robb clasped Jon's forearm. "If Walder Frey slams his gate, burn only the far parapet," he murmured. His grin flared, then gentled. "Mother always said you'd find some way to fly." Jon laughed. A raw surprise sound, as if he'd forgotten how laughter fitted his throat. He swung up into saddle, signaled Stormfire with a gentle squeeze. The dragon rose through fog, wings stirring vortices that ripped petals from river-edge hawthorn, and slipped into veiled sky. Approaching the massive twin castles straddling the Green Fork, Jon guided Stormfire into the rising sun, letting his silhouette burn as a perfect black spear above morning's glare. Horns blared below, small shapes scurrying like insects across ramparts. Jon inhaled the crisp air, tasting the tension. The realm poised on precipice. This first public negotiation of dragon and lord would ripple through every court. He tapped Stormfire's neck in the pattern for controlled flame. The dragon banked, and together they painted the sky. Green fire hissed into water, tracing a direwolf's maw punching through reflected sun, sizzling across current and steaming arcs. Mist erupted, billowing upward like new-forged clouds. Sunlight gilded droplets emerald. Silence reigned, but for the sizzle of river water turning to vapor. Jon held position, wings beating slow. Serpentine shadow sprawled across the towers. Then, creak by reluctant creak, the southern gatehouse's drawbridge lowered. Squads of crossbowmen knelt, arms laid upon stones in surrender posture. A banner unfurled, pale silver field cleft by dark line. Frey's standard quartered with Stark's direwolf. Victory without slaughter. Jon exhaled. He wheeled Stormfire to circle once, flames dormant, then angled back toward Robb's vanguard. Behind, Walder Frey's weasel-thin figure emerged on a parapet, craning neck after the dragon, doubtless with curses already forming. But the gate stood open, and the wolf would cross. By nightfall, Stark pikes rattled across planks, and thousands of boots hammered corridors, seldom granted to foreigners without toll. Jon remained airborne until last wagon passed, then landed beyond the northern gate to rest. Robb galloped to meet him, face alight, eyes rimmed with exhaustion and triumph. "That," he said, voice hoarse, "was a song worth hearing." Even the Frey girls cheered, and they cheer for little. Jon slid from saddle, muscles trembling with fatigue. Songs fade. We have wars yet. Bah. Wars, aye. Robb's gaze sought the northern horizon where thunderheads gathered like mustering gods. But with you and your dragon, we may chance at peace on our terms. He squeezed Jon's shoulder. We ride at dawn for the Whispering Wood. Jaime Lannister marches hard, thinks me pinned north of the neck. He'll find ghosts instead. Stormfire shifted, sniffing the wind heavy with pine and the faint scent of men's sweat. Jon looked into his brother's face, and for the first time since leaving Winterfell months ago, he saw something stronger than fear or grief in those eyes. He saw horizon. Deep night settled, broken only by torch flickers and the occasional hiss of damp wood in fires. Jon brushed down Stormfire's neck ridges with handfuls of damp moss, soothing the dragon's muscles. Ghosts prowled between rows of sleeping pikemen, tail wagging each time a sentinel offered dried beef. Jon's eyes lingered on the heavens where new stars kindled in velvet black. He remembered what Ned said. "Choose your cuts." He vowed to be the scalpel wielded with precision, the flame withheld until rightful moment. The wolf's fidelity unbroken. Beyond hill crests, dim flashes flared. Distant watchtowers burning, perhaps a Lannister encampment harried by outriders. War crept like slow fire across tinder-dry fields. But in this brief wedge of silence, Jon nestled against Stormfire's warm side, cloak drawn. He pictured Ned waking in Dragonstones. Keep to the news of safe passage. Pictured Arya's grin under some city's arch. When she heard her father lived, pictured Sansa freed at last from gilded cage. For the first time he believed each vision possible. When sleep claimed him, it carried him on wings of emerald, through dream skies jeweled with ice. He flew over a world ablaze with change, yet in his dream the blaze did not consume. It forged, and somewhere beneath those scrimshaw heavens, he heard the steady heartbeat of pack, wolf and dragon, marking the rhythm of a realm reborn in fire and frost.